We're live. Hello. Welcome, everyone, to issue episode 24 of...
You already dropped the ball, man.
24 episodes so far, Alan. Congratulations.
That's crazy. I did not realize it had been that many.
I think we're going to start keeping track of that as we go along here. But
Yep, we shall do so.
It's good to see you. Welcome back, Professor Steele.
Yeah, that seems to be taking on a life of its own. Thanks, Philip.
You sound like you're a lot less mucusy than last time we spoke last week.
Yes, you guys were covering grindcore, but I was sort of, Lord Mucus of Snotland over here, just completely where the slime lives was right here. But
well, it was
we've got that out of the system mostly.
We Rick and myself decided that the grindcore episode was a good one to tackle when you were under the weather, because we figured that probably, not that it's at the forefront of my listening time either, but it's good to it's not a topic I could have contributed much to. It's I've got nothing against the style, but I don't know it in any depth whatsoever. And you and Rick and Eric did a fantastic job. It was fun listening to it. Well, thanks. But we're pretty excited today. We've got a guest, very talented author, David Gehlke. He has written 2 books recently: No Celebration, The Official Story of Paradise Lost, and Damn the Machine, The Story of Noise Records. And without further ado, we're going to get David in here.
Absolutely.
David, hello.
Hello, Marty. Hi, On. How you guys doing?
Hey, David. Thanks for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, glad to do it. Absolutely. Really excited that you're here.
Yeah.
Very excited. We were talking in the background there, I have not read Paradise Lost book yet, but the Damn the Machine book was a definite page flipper for me. I'm going to definitely, it's one of those books worth revisiting, and very excited to have you on.
Oh, likewise. Well, thank you. I remember, Marty, when the book came out, I think you did like a YouTube review for it. So yeah. I appreciated that very much. And
Guerrilla
I
style.
have to say, Marty, I mean, I'm 39, so I was of the era that still read magazines. And I read Metal Maniacs religiously as a teenager growing up in Pittsburgh. And I remember all your Zine and Not Heard articles. And I think you interviewed Immortal one time, and you called Abeth, and you got his mom instead. And
that was
with his mom. Yeah, I mean, I read those cover to cover like all the time. So those are permanently stamped in my memory there. So when I think of Damned in Black, the Immortal album that came out in 2000, I oftentimes think of the interview in that issue.
I wish you could have been a fly on the wall listening to that, because it was crazy. I tried to describe it in the intro as best I could, because it was very frustrating. But calling someone and an old woman answers in Norwegian, and I start talking in English. I'm like, is a bath there? He's on the sea with his son fishing. I'm like,
yeah,
he's not supposed to be. Just saying.
Oh man, yeah, that was hilarious. Yeah, so my 16, 17-year-old self thought that was pretty hysterical. I'm thinking, like, wow, that's what these guys get to do,
Well, thanks. Those were good times for sure.
Oh, it was the best. That was a very influential magazine. I mean, I've gotten to know Jeff Wagner over the years, and I've fanboyed out with him a few times and said, Jeff, anytime you wrote about a band, I would order it the next day from Century Media or something like that. So
Jeff is still a prince, man. I love the guy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Him and Zoller, I'm still in contact with. I talk to Zoller more than Jeff. Jeff's a pretty busy guy, but they both are. But no, good times, and it's great to come away from the experience with friends.
Yeah,
they were here before the pandemic. They came together and we hung out for a weekend and nerded out to music. Me and Zoller tried to turn Jeff onto a bunch of stuff that he wasn't having. It was fun. Halloween is one. Well, he loves Halloween, but we're trying to get him to listen to some of the other stuff, and he's just like, nah.
Yeah, Jeff will tell you what he likes and doesn't like, and he's very knowledgeable, and he probably has more knowledge crammed in his brain than the three of us and ours combined.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't doubt it at all.
Yeah. Encyclopedia, and he doesn't lose it either. The older I get, the fuzzier it gets. He just seems to retain it.
Yep. I remember there was a little blurb in one of those old Metal Maniacs episodes. Right around the turn of the century, somebody in Canada had put out like a heavy metal Trivial Pursuit kind of game.
I've got this. It's in the other room.
I've got it too.
And I remember somebody did like a little write up that Jeff and Sue Knowles and one or two of the other writers, editors for Metal Maniac sat down and played it together one time. And the write-up basically just said Jeff answered every fucking question.
Yeah.
And the scorecard was something like 16 to 35 to 5,438 at the end. And the other two are just like. And Sue is really smart. I mean, Sue had a really deep knowledge of metal too. And she's just like, I feel like an idiot sitting next to this guy playing this game. It was just this funny blurb of. They couldn't come up with a question he couldn't answer in that whole box of questions. And there was weird, obscure stuff in that game.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a lot of errors in that game too. Actually, going through the questions, there were mistakes. But
yep, there were some problems with it. But
it's really too bad they didn't continue adding questions to it. It would have been kind of a cool thing. But again, it's a niche thing.
20 years ago, so think of what you could have added to it since. It'd be.
Somebody needs a Kickstarter campaign there. Heavy Metal 2.
That'll be a game. Yep.
So, David, are these two books the only two books under your belt?
Well, currently right now there are, but I just finished a third one, and I'm not allowed to say who, but it is a Floridian death metal band, and they have a song called "Chopped in Half." How about that? So I'll let you guys connect the dots on that.
See.
So we just finished it, and so an announcement forthcoming on that, but that is lips are sealed beyond that. So hopefully I didn't spill the beans too much there.
We'll say no more, but that's very cool news. Thanks for letting us know.
Yeah.
It's really cool that you are, speaking of, that metal game was kind of in a niche market. I mean, you're forging a path, there's several other people that are as well writing, metal centered books.
Yeah.
You're setting out in a niche market, and it appears that the books are doing quite well. Alan was telling me the Paradise Lost book is already sold out through Decibel.
Yeah, it's interesting because you're right, Marty. It's such a niche market, and no one writes metal books to make money. So it's sort of like a thing if you're really passionate about it, and there definitely is a nerd element to it too, right? Because you want to learn all the various facts and stories behind these bands, and Decibel is a huge supporter of that. They're really leading the way in those type of things, and Decibel really supported the Noise book when it came out 4 years ago. That's how I got to know Albert, and so by me getting to know Albert, it's how I ended up doing the Paradise Lost book.
Who's a huge Paradise Lost fan.
Yeah, I mean, when we started talking about doing that book, I said, and I pitched him the idea. I said, okay, I think you're like at a 10 for Paradise Lost. I'm at like a 9.8 on terms of like the fan scale. And so from there, we were able to get in touch with their management and eventually get the ball rolling sometime in 2018 or so. But Decibel's really led the way. But there was books, even before we jumped on, Marty, the Celtic Frost book here, that's very niche. No one's going to buy that kind of book outside of the metal scene. But though, if you are into metal, like, it doesn't get any better than that. If someone writing about one of the most influential bands in metal history, you'd be hard pressed to do better than that. But yeah, it's great. I mean, metal has such a rich history to it too, and people are there's just such a thirst of knowledge and stories and great things that have happened that it just makes sense to do books on, whether it's record companies or all these great bands, or there's books about black metal now. Then the USBM book is great too, and the Finnish death metal book, all those things. I mean, who wouldn't want to read about those things?
Absolutely. And the one thing you definitely have going for you is metal fans. I mean, people that like country music, they like country music. But I think a vast majority of country music fans like what's on the radio, and they're fine with that.
Yeah.
They're fine with the same 20 songs all day long. Whereas, the metal scene is very fanatical, and where, you put out a book like the Noise book, and which really, really appealed to guys like myself and Alan, who are the generation that were coming up when Noise International was getting started. Not Noise Records. It was I always call it Noise International because the US side. But so I mean, it was really amazing to get absorbed in that stuff and hear all the stories, which we will talk about. But I do want to touch on the Paradise Lost, and how did you decide to start, I mean, you decide to write a book. Do you go
Yeah.
out and find someone that likes your idea and wants to put it out? Or do you say, fuck it, I'm writing this book and
Yeah.
I'll see what happens?
There's two things to it, really. I mean, if you think about the Noise book, I put that out myself here in the States, but thankfully I had someone put it out in Germany here. So I made up my own publishing company. It looks very pro.
The
but
Liberation Press, is that you?
That's my own publishing company. So I did that myself to give it some sort of air of professionalism, even though when I maybe not so much a professional. But the Noise book was an idea I had, sort of like you, Marty. I'm a little bit younger than you, but I mean, all those noise bands, Halloween, Celtic Frost, Creator, down the line, Gamma Ray, all those bands I loved. And I Tom's book too, right here, he said so many bad things about Karl Walterbach. It's like, I got to learn more about this guy. And then Karl reemerged on the scene like in 2012 or 2013, like managing bands. And he had a blog. He had this rinky dink blog that he just threw together. And I emailed him one day and said, hey, can I interview you for some of the webzines I was writing for? And he responded back within a day. And that's how we struck up a relationship. But Karl and I just kept on talking. And then finally I said, hey, what do you think about doing a book about your career? But we'd also need to talk to the bands too, because this can't be a one-sided thing, knowing how people feel about Karl. And so that's where that started. So there's a do-it-yourself aspect there. And that was a lot of legwork. And thankfully I had the time and energy to do it back then in 2014. But Paradise Lost was really, Albert from Decibel really liked the Noise book, and he and I stayed in touch. And then I emailed him, I think around 2017 when Medusa came out, and said, hey, Paradise Lost is reaching their 30th year anniversary. I think they have a great history. What do you think about doing a book? And he was gung-ho about it. And thankfully he has a good relationship with their management, Andy Farrow, who also does, Devon and Opeth and Catatonia. We made the connection, and then we got started. So, I mean, there's really two sides to it, but it always helps to have a publisher behind you, obviously, because, they can help, do all that legwork. And putting out a book on your own was a ton of work. I mean, there's just so much to it. I mean, you have to deal with, like formatting and getting pictures and hiring someone to proofread it and getting someone to design it, all those things. So, I would definitely do a self-release book again, knowing what I know now, but having a publisher behind you, especially someone like Decibel, you couldn't ask for anything more than that.
Yeah.
So,
I know a lot about putting out records and the cost of that. I can't imagine how much something like this cost. I can't imagine. This was a leap of faith right here.
Yeah, it was. And thankfully I was able to gradually recoup on sales. I mean, like I said, you don't go into this looking to make money, but a lot of that was paid out of my own pocket.
Have happened though.
Yeah. So I'm very happy I did it, and it opened a lot of doors for me. So but yeah, it was the great Karl Walterbach. First time where I signed with Karl. Oh man, that's yeah. Tom told me some very interesting things that I could not put into the book. Something to the effect of, if he ever saw Karl Walterbach on a street in Berlin, it would not end very well. So I'm paraphrasing here.
Talk is cheap.
But I'm still in touch with Karl here and there. He and I emailed just a few times over the years. When COVID hit last year, I wanted to see how he was doing, and he checked in, and so he seems to be doing all right. He still lives in Berlin. I got to visit him about 5 years ago, and he was like my Berlin tour guide, which was nice. Which was really cool. So we he took me to where the Wall was and all these great places within Berlin. So Karl's still doing his thing over there.
Cool. Yeah. So just out of curiosity, the two books are kind of different, because you've got one that's a very deep dive on one band, and you've got the other that's looking in as much detail as you can, but you're covering like an entire label's roster. How different did you have to approach it? Very differently? Did it have a very different feel, or did you use the same process?
The Noise book took like triple the amount of work. How about that? Than doing the Paradise Lost book. The Paradise Lost book was really easy, because you have it's two main guys basically. It's Greg and Nick. You start with them. Aaron, the rhythm guitar player, is great too. Steve, the bassist, he's a man of few words, needless to say, but it was great to talk to. But then you just go down the list and talk to the people who record labels they were with. So Peaceville, and then when they went to the majors, and Music for Nations. So Martin Hooker, who sadly passed away right before the Paradise Lost book came out. and Jim Howard, the guys from Music for Nations, then their major label era. So that made it very easy. But the Noise book, I got to say, I had no organization at all with that. It was Carl, and then whatever bands I could eventually cajole into talking to doing the book. Mm-hmm. And people like Tom G. Warrior, I think on like my 8th try, he finally agreed to do it. I don't want to say I pleaded with him, but there were a lot of I don't want to call testy email exchanges, but like a lot of like saying, "Hey Tom, it would be great if you could still do this," like gentle nudging along the way. And then I got lucky enough, his manager Anchalang, who worked for Century Media for a while, eventually talked Tom into doing it. I think Tom and I talked for about 3 hours, and it was great. But other bands were really, Halloween was actually really easy to do because I had met Michael Wyckoff previously, so he and I already had a relationship, and Kiska was easy to get as well. Kai probably took a little bit longer to get as well. Milla from Creator was easy to get, but yeah, Alan, to your point, I mean, it was so much different doing the Noise book than the Paradise Lost book. The Paradise Lost book was a really easy experience. I mean, there was maybe like 1 or 2 people that I couldn't track down, where the Noise book was a lot of emails, a lot of like late night transcriptions, and a lot of DIY there. But it all worked out in the end.
I gotta wonder Tom's apprehension. I mean, we've all heard how the Celtic Frost reissues that were done, he was pissed off about the liner notes. I'm sure, talking to someone about very raw experiences for the guy, he was probably worried about being misquoted and taken out of context.
Nope,
I'm sure there's all this stuff kind of played into his initial reluctance.
Tom was reluctant because he thought that it was Carl Walterbach's autobiography, and I had to explain to him that it was not. I mean, in some ways it is. Let's not kid ourselves, because the first few chapters talk about Carl.
Well, that was necessary. That was necessary.
Yeah. So once Tom found out that all the other bands had been involved, and it was just my job, I sort of saw myself as like the mediator between Carl and the bands. Which as a journalist, I think you have to take that position. You can't take a side in those sort of things, and that was my approach all along. And hopefully it reflected in the pages. But Tom was very reluctant to do so. Kai Hansen was the same way at first too. It took Lim Schnorr, who was their original manager, to convince Kai to do it. So yeah, I mean, there was definitely a lot of that, convincing people to make sure that it was a fair and even book. And thankfully,
I wonder why he would be so reluctant. Because I mean, Gamma Ray, after all the shit that went down with Halloween, Gamma Ray still came out on Noise. They were a Noise band.
Yeah, well, Kai was still bound to Noise based on his Halloween contract, so there's not much Kai could have done.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I think Kai over time grew a little weary of Carl's business practices throughout the 1990s. Even though Gamma Ray was one of the few successful power metal bands in the 90s, it was basically them, and I mean, Stratovarius was a little bit later in the 90s, but them and Blind Guardian were really and Angra too, if we want to put those bands together. Gamma Ray had its success, but I think Kai, I think there's still some unresolved business issues between Kai and Carl Walterbach that likely will never get resolved. But you mentioned the reissues, the 2017 Noise reissues and the liner notes. I had met the folks at BMG who were handling Noise, and they sent me Tom's original liner notes that he wanted to include in the reissues for Morbid Tales, to Megatheron, and into the Pandora. And I do understand why they would not want those put in the final version. And I understand Tom's standpoint too, of being upset, because those were Tom's experiences. But I think what the BMG people were trying to do was maybe cast Noise in a more positive light. And Tom G. Warrior is never going to cast Noise in a positive light. So I think that's why those liner notes got omitted after a certain time. But yeah, I still have them. I pull them out every now and then for a good laugh. I mean, it's nothing new that I haven't heard from Tom before, but they were really interesting to read. So still some festering animosity there for sure.
Yep. That's very cool. So yeah, you mean, obviously the book covered, a great swath across the, history of Noise and Walter's life and career. Were there certain people that did slip through the cracks that you just couldn't nail down for whatever reason, that you wish you could have got, some time to interview with?
Rod Smallwood, sure, from Iron Maiden's manager. He, because he got involved with the Halloween saga around, 87, 88. Here's Halloween, this high-flying German band who's basically the younger, zippier version of Maiden, right?
Yeah,
And,
German Iron Maiden. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. So
they were the heir apparent.
They were the heir apparent, yes. And once Smallwood got involved and took Carl to court and all these things, that was really what started Noise's gradual downhill, unfortunately, throughout the 90s. Yeah, Stronger Than Ever. Yeah. Anyone who's listened to Stronger Than Ever can safely attest that it's not the best digger / grave digger.
Brian has to say that because he wasted money actually buying that record recently and knew darn what he'd been warned.
Yeah.
And he still forked out cash, so he's got to make himself feel better about that.
Just
We know what you're trying to do, Brian.
That shows that Chris Boltondahl should just stick to what he does. Chris Boltondahl should not attempt being a singer. He is just a dude, a gruff guy, as a front man, But Stronger Than Ever is that's one of the more forgettable Noise releases for sure, but memorable in its own right too. Because of the robotic
the cover. The cover is not forgettable. Sadly, it's burned into your retinas.
Yeah, and I got lucky. I interviewed the manager, and Gerd Henke was their manager, and it was his idea to do the robotic duck. And the idea was like, hey, we have a new name. We're Stronger Than Ever, but you can't put a robotic duck on a heavy metal album.
Howard the Duck, yeah.
Yeah.
There are other ways to represent your back and Stronger Than Ever than using Howard the Duck in robot form.
Absolutely. Yeah, but Chris Boltondahl, there's another one who does not like Carl in the slice, but he was very easy to get to. He was quick to respond and wanted to talk. So he was great to speak with and was a really nice guy. So it was good to get. I was not expecting him to be willing to do the Noise book, but he signed on pretty quickly and was able to contribute to the Gravedigger chapter. I almost said Digger there, but it's Gravedigger.
It was Digger once upon a time.
It was.
Those were dark times.
I'm real curious about hearing about your process. I mean, you did some writing for webzines and stuff leading up to this, which is a lot of email interviews, and something as intimate as the Paradise Lost book and as intimate as all the interviews that went into the Noise book. You must have really, trial by fire, you really refined your interview style. I mean, there's a certain style in being able to coax information out of somebody that may not be that necessarily interested in sharing all the deep dark secrets. I mean, how have you navigated that over the years? And as you grew as a interviewer, how did you become comfortable with this?
I always like to start. I know this is a cliche. Like you start with some softball questions, just ease into it. Eventually, never start with the hard stuff ever, and that will usually get guys to open up. But also, you have to get them comfortable. Get them
little sugar makes the medicine go down.
No doubt. But like with the Noise book, these guys knew what we were talking about. But at the same time, you'd want to start. I always started with, for most of these bands, the early part of their career was where they were most successful. But then when they ran into issues with Carl, that's when things went downhill. So I think I developed some sort of skill there with some of these guys to get them to open up and have conversations. And also, we had talked about this being a great time for metal books and being the era that these stories are now 20 or 30 years old. Some of these guys have just been sitting on these stories for years and probably want to get them out now that there's no repercussions. They can, when they were on Noise, Michael Weiketh's not going to go to Metal Hammer Germany and say bad things about Carl when, Halloween's on Noise. Now, 20, 25 years after the fact, they could say whatever they want, knowing that Carl is not going to pursue legal action against them. So I think that helps. And it's just the passage of time too. All these, if you look at a lot of the Noise bands, what really helped, I think, the Noise book was these bands started out in Noise, had their success. Most of them hit a lull in the 90s. But today, I mean, look at Marty's shirt, for instance. A lot of these Noise bands, Halloween and Creator, we could start with them. They're as successful as they've ever been. They're both European festival headliners here. So I think that really helps too. And again, I think with interviewing, it needs to be. I was just trying to make it a relaxed setting here. I don't try to talk about myself here. I know bands that sort of annoys people, but with Noise it was easy because it was sort of like that's where these bands got their start. And so that made those guys open up really easy. With Paradise Lost, it was, those guys actually don't like talking about themselves plain, like, straight up there. Like Greg McIntosh hates talking about himself. He doesn't like compliments. You can tell him that, XYZ song off of Host, which is, the album that no one likes from 1999 is great. And he just brushes it off. But, those Greg and Nick are good storytellers too, just because they've been so invested in their career. A lot of those memories are thankfully still very fresh in their mind. But yeah, there's no real art to it. But, Marty and Alan, you guys have done so many interviews over the years. It takes practice. It's like, don't ask obvious questions. Don't ask stupid questions, or things I always tell myself. Mm-hmm. Don't ask questions you already know the answer to, because you're not going to get anywhere. So those are the principles that I followed with these bands.
I found also that depending on the culture, the country, how people are, like if you interview an American band and when they're done talking, you could say a couple things to get them back into the, to elaborate. Whereas like I interviewed Isan when Anthems came out, and when he finished his answer, it was dead silence.
Yeah, sure.
And you try to, create conversation to get him. He was just kind
of done. He
was just kind of fucking done. And I heard it's like the Norwegian thing or whatever, but it all kind of depends on what country you're dealing with.
Scandinavian bands, I've interviewed a lot of Scandinavian, they'll do that too, because it's sort of in that mind frame. They don't like to talk about themselves. They don't like to brag. Mm-hmm. It's sort of like let the music do the talking. But a lot of the German bands are just fantastic to speak to. They have great senses of humor and can talk for hours. Maybe the one exception on the Scandinavian front was Jens Johansson, who was still a Stradivarius keyboard player. He's always hilarious to speak to. He's a good guy to chat with. So every now and then you'll have an exception there.
Sure. Yep. Yeah. That leads me to something else I've wondered, just in a general context. And since you've talked to so many of these bands from Germany and elsewhere, maybe you can offer some insights. What is it? Is there something about Germany or German culture that's made it such a really fertile breeding ground for so many high quality legacy heavy metal bands over the years? Germany's got to be one of the the 3 or 4 top countries in the world for producing bands, not just for like a short particular style, but for decades. It just keeps coming out of Germany with really high quality stuff. And what's in the water over there that makes that happen?
It seems like Germany maybe more than other countries, and we can't speak out about the United States because we know the musical environment here, but Germany seems like it's sort of adverse to trends in a way. If Halloween, for instance, their new album went to #1 on the German charts. Like what
in other countries too?
Yeah, other countries too. So I think their climate is if the Germans like a band and they're a true metal band and they've stuck to their guns and they're reliable, then the German fans will continue to support them. Conversely, though, if you make a left-hand turn when you're supposed to stay straight, that you may lose them for a while. And Halloween was obviously guilty of that for a little bit in the mid-90s. Chameleon, Pink Bubbles. People always want to bash Pink Bubbles, but I don't think Pink Bubbles is as bad as Chameleon.
I love half of it. The other half I like. I mean, it's not a great album, but I like it.
Yeah, Pink Bubbles is not a great album by any stretch, but it's not as terrible as people make it out to be. I think it's the album cover as well as the title too.
Well, and it follows so many very strong albums back to back to back that it was anything that was going to be a step down was going to look like a big step down, and it was going to happen sooner or later.
Yeah, but I'm so envious of what they have in Germany. They support their bands. Their bands do well. They're like you both said. There's always some new great German bands coming out here, and they have a leg up on basically everywhere else in the metal scene. It seems. I don't know, but yeah, maybe it is in the beer. Who knows? That could explain why.
Well, another thought, Alan, I just had is look at scenes like Germany, Norway, Sweden. I mean, what do they all have in common? I mean, metal is not looked down upon like in the U.S. I think a metal scene is more positively cultivated in Europe. The bands have better venues to play. They might be treated a bit better by promoters. There's a million fests for the band if you get the right you know the right people, you're going to get on these fests. You know, you can drive anywhere. You know, it takes us 8 hours to fly to Seattle, whereas, you know, 8 hours, they could cover a lot of countries.
A lot of ground. Yeah, I think
So,
that's
there's,
right.
there's more of a culture of promotion and support behind a lot of these bands.
It's good infrastructure, like you said. You know, a lot of the big labels are there still in Germany. You know, Nuclear Blast and Century Media, Napalm's in Austria, so right next door. So Metal Blade has an office there too. So yeah, I think it's just a much stronger infrastructure that they have over there to support those bands than what we have here, no doubt.
In Wacken sells out when they announce tickets. It sells out in hours, 70,000 tickets.
That's
every year.
It's amazing. Yep.
Out of all the, I mean, you started writing the Noise book. Out of all the metal topics, what was the impetus to say, okay, Noise Records it is. I'm going to write a story. I mean, this is a very influential label for me, and I know Alan as well. Whenever I go into the store, I mean, I bought the Doomsday News Comp, loved every band on it, had to buy every band, and I see that iconic emblem, which Alan is wearing on a shirt right now. I'd have to buy it, you know, and for a long time, that was a seal of quality.
Yeah.
What made you decide Noise was where you were going to start?
It's sort of that seal of quality too, because I have a lot of Noise CDs back here, original pressings of those with the the Noise International logo slapped on and the Crosby Street address from Brooklyn. There, it's probably a combination of Tom's book too, reading about how he dealt with Carl and everything too, and just. What also helped the Noise book is Carl's a legitimate personality. You don't have record label personalities anymore in the metal scene. A lot of these guys are just behind the scenes, and they're good dudes. They're mostly pretty ethical here, but you think of Carl, and I guess if we want to throw Digby Pearson in the mix too, they're sort of the more controversial record label owners of the late 80s, early 90s. So I think having that type of personality, that controversial guy running the label that would be able to supply those sort of stories probably really helped too. So that was really the impetus behind it. And plus, I had been writing for webzines and other things too. So it just felt like it was time to do a book and see what came of it. But thankfully Noise had all those elements that came together. I mean, it took me over 3 years to write it, but it all came together. So that definitely helped with it.
Got something, Alan?
Oh, sorry. I was just checking comments here and trying to keep up with those too, because folks are saying lots of neat things here.
There's one question for David here.
Yeah, go and
Accuser. I've never interviewed Accuser. I know the one album I think is pretty good. What's the Conviction? I think was one of their earlier ones that came out. But yeah, I don't think I've ever interviewed Accuser in there. Yeah, that was interesting about Noise. They had so many I had to do that little section the hidden treasures of Noise because they had all these bands that just never made it, but over time their stuff has held up really well. And so yeah, Accusers is certainly one of them. I don't think I put them in that section, but and someone here just said I'd love to get an earache book. I think that would be really cool too to do that. You could imagine the back and forth between Digby and Barney Greenway too. That would be pretty hilarious, but I don't know if Dig would ever submit himself to something like that. Someone brought up to me not too long about doing a book about combat records, which would be interesting.
Awesome, yeah.
To do, if you think of Dark Angel and Exodus, and they had Megadeth for for those few albums when they had the licensing deal with Capitol. So Barry Coburn's the guy who did combat, but he's sort of just fallen off the face of the earth because I tried to track him down for the Noise book, because Noise and combat were doing business for a little bit, but he is nowhere to be found. So if anyone could find Barry Coburn, maybe that's a good place to start.
Yeah, I've heard other people have tried to find that guy, and they just hit dead ends fast.
It's actually Chris Black who suggested the Combat Records book, actually.
Oh, okay.
So a reliable source, no doubt. So who knows if that will ever come to fruition. But an earache book would be cool. Combat. There's the Peaceful one too that just came out not too long ago.
I haven't read that yet either. I need to get on
Hammy did. It's pretty good. Hammy's a good guy. So
yeah.
So I think earache would be pretty cool to do though.
Yeah, Brian kind of did his own Metal Blade book, which was a fun read, but it was a little disappointingly short. I wish he had gone into a lot more.
Very short,
stuff.
and yeah, I have that. I bought the Kindle version. I think I finished it in a day. I was on jury duty in downtown Pittsburgh, and I just blew through it. And yeah, there's nothing controversial about it whatsoever. You know, Brian's sitting on a minefield of great stories here, but maybe he's got him saved for another edition. Who knows?
Maybe so. Yep. Yeah. That you mentioned, that you had to do like a lot of the hidden treasures, kind of the little 1-page sidebar kind of things for noise bands. Was there one of those bands that you really wanted to dedicate a full chapter to, and either just because of length or you couldn't track down enough people that it just didn't come together? But was it one band you're just like, man, I feel bad that they didn't get more coverage in the book?
I thought it'd be cool when we before we started chatting with live, something on Iron Savior I thought would be pretty cool with Gehlke would be cool, just based on, it wouldn't be a super long chapter, but based on his early involvement in the early days of Halloween, Gentry, and his work as a producer and all these things. And, Marty and I were saying, he was almost the first singer of Halloween too, and it didn't work out for whatever reason. So
which would have been great in its own right. I mean, that would have been cool too, because he's got a great voice.
He's got a great voice. Yeah. The first few Iron Savior albums were great. That came out in the late 90s with Kai on them. But I think Iron Savior probably would have been the only one there. It's funny, when the book came out, a lot of people emailed me about Scanner. So a lot of people want to talk about Scanner.
Hypertrace, man, that fucking album is amazing.
That album is great with its futuristic artwork, and it does sound a little futuristic too.
Yep.
Some sense. So we need to find out, see what Scanner's up to these days. I haven't been following them.
Their last one was pretty damn good, really. I don't know when they.
I think they're still around. Yeah,
I think they are.
When did that come out, Marty? I know because they did albums. They took a break. They started doing some more albums in the late 90s, and then I lost track of them.
I lost track of them too. I think they just did something.
Let me access the Oracle here. The Judgment came out in 2015, and it says they are still active.
So it's been a little bit.
Scantropolis, on the other hand, was not good.
Great album. Very underrated band. The problem what happened was, Carl gave these bands like terrible album artwork at the time, and they just would not be taken seriously, no matter how good they were. If you were in that lower tier of noise, you were going to get like the bottom of the barrel.
He didn't want to spend the money.
Yeah, he didn't want to spend the money, and he had no, it had been talked about in the book a few times. He had no like quality control department. Usually at most labels, there's a person there who will read the liner notes and make sure the artwork's all put together. Carl he was cranking out so many releases, was like, okay, done, and get it out the door. So that's why, I think my copy of Creator Coma of Souls here on the, the spine of the CD, Souls is spelled wrong. It's spelled SOLS. Yeah. So
I need to look at that.
I still have it here. So.
Yeah, I remember that came up like in the Rage chapter quite a bit. They were really unhappy with some of the.
So I don't know.
Here's a picture of the band and the logo and.
Holy shit!
You see it? Come on, yeah. Isn't that amazing? Yeah. So those are the type of things that were happening at Noise all the time, and it just infuriated Tom G. Warrior. I'm sure that made Milla pretty upset too, as it should. But Tom was just incensed over those things of missing lyrics and misspelled stuff within the titles. I mean, it's sort of unacceptable,
Yeah, it's funny because it's the kind of thing that really would not happen today with a label working on an international level.
No. I'm sure there's still mistakes here and there, but not on that magnitude,
not like that.
Misspelling stuff.
A record that big. I mean, that was a big record,
Yeah, Coma Souls was big. And might I add, probably the best creator of that bunch, I would say. That's probably my favorite creator of the Noise era. I know everyone loves Endless Pain and Terrible Certainty is great, but
Extreme Aggression's my jam. That's their shining moment.
Extreme Aggression's great because it has their best song, which is Love Us or Hate Us. That's probably the best song on.
It's hard to choose for me on that album. That thing is beginning to end.
Some Pain Will Last is pretty great too. So,
yeah.
Well,
I feel that you really did a great job being an impartial vessel for both
Mhm.
positive and negative thoughts to come through in these interviews. I mean, could you share some of your favorite moments?
Of the interviews, one of my favorite moments was Michael Wyckoff lives in Tenerife, Spain, and we did a video chat just like this. He lives by himself in a house, and halfway through the chat, he grabs like a fly swatter because he's got flies in his house. And here and I are talking about, Carl, and here's Wyckoff going around swatting flies in his house in Tenerife. So that was definitely a memorable moment there. Talking to Carl all the time is very interesting. Talking to Carl because he would go to a Berlin cafe a lot to speak.
Mhm.
Carl has a lot of burner phones, so I'll let you guys put two and two together there. But Carl would go to a Berlin cafe with a black hat on, cordon himself off in the corner. He and I would have our video chats like this, and that was like our Sunday ritual. So like 10 a.m. my time, so that was 2 p.m. German time, no 4 p.m. German time. I'm sorry. So yeah, those were some of my favorite moments there too. I spoke to the late Martin Eric Ain, and near the end of our interview, he ordered a pizza right as we got done. So his girlfriend came in and asked him, hey Martin, what in Swiss German, what would you like? And he said pizza. And so I still have that on tape. Martin was a great guy. He was a huge loss a few years ago, but he was a pleasure to speak with. But someone mentioned, that brought the Digger comment too, their manager trying to sell me on the Stronger Than Ever album cover, saying this shows that we're stronger than ever. So I have that firmly embedded in my mind. So yeah, they're all really great memories there too. I spoke with Andy Sneap now, who obviously is with Judas Priest, and we did a video chat. His cat walks by, and he had just got done in the studio, so it was like 2 a.m. UK time, and we talked about Sabbath for an hour or so, which is great. And he is a great dude. He's every bit as nice as they say. I know people beat down on him for his production jobs and everything like that, but he is a super nice dude, and it's really great to see him. I know people get upset seeing him play with Priest, but he was probably the best choice given the circumstances with Glenn Tipton.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. What was when it was all said and done? I think fans have been very happy with the book. What was Walter's reaction when he saw the final product? Did he want it run by him before you let it out the door?
Yeah, I did share a lot of things with Carl. Yeah, I shared almost all the book with Carl, and he had some input. Some I took, some I did not. In the end, I mean, there were some things he disagreed with, but that was fine. I mean, we're still friends to this day, so I think that says something about our relationship here. I think Carl did take exception to a lot of things the band said, but I only prepared him for that, only about 800 times.
He had to know that he wasn't going to be held in a favorable light with some bands.
From 2014 through late 2016, almost every interview I said to him, hey, just so you know, this, that, and the other said this about you, and so he knew it was coming. So
one thing I thought was really interesting about a lot of those interviews, when it was a little bit of a pattern through a lot of the chapters, that the bands would be pretty blunt, and pretty critical of Carl, but in a lot of cases you also had them quoted, often like at the end of the chapter, that they always did, or most of them did, always want to at least give him credit for helping them get off the ground. That they did say, well, even though maybe the record deal was crap and we didn't agree with him and he didn't treat us out great, he did give us he helped us get our foot in the door. They always seemed to stop and acknowledge that, so they were willing to still give the devil his due in a way.
Look at it this way: in the mid 1980s, when the European underground was just starting, who are the record labels at the time? There's not that many out there, and Carl was signing these bands who otherwise, you had Manfred and SPV, and you had some of the other ones, No Remorse, and some of the ones over here in the States, but Carl gave these bands their shot, and that in itself is where he deserves the credit. Otherwise, Carl never extends Tom G. Warrior a record deal with Hellhammer. Are we even going to know who he is? Is it possible? Yep. It's very possible. The creator is. Carl didn't like the Tormentor End of the World demo. Is Mila Petroza a household name in the metal scene? I don't know. So I think that's how a lot of these bands looked at it. Carl gave them their shot, and their business relationships were what they were, and things went sideways with a lot of these things. But Carl does deserve credit with that, and thankfully a lot of those bands acknowledged that in itself.
Yeah, I guess that's maybe it's a good time for that kind of thing too. That enough years have passed at those bands.
Yeah, the passage
they're
of
not going to
time.
forget what happened, but they can they can see it with some perspective. This far down the road.
Some bands really had that. Like the Corner guys. I talked to Tommy Vetterli, Tommy T. Barron, so he sort of felt the same way about things. They had it rough with Noise too, but I think he understands. They may never have gotten their shot if it weren't for Tom passing along the Death Cult demo to Carl, and that's how they got signed. So also connects together here. I almost wore my Corner shirt tonight, Marty, by the way, because I know you're a big Corner fan. But
huge fan, yeah. Except for Grin, not a fan. But other than that,
I can do without Grin too. I definitely agree. What worries me is like Tommy hasn't done a lot of interviews, and when I interviewed him back in 2014, he said they were working on a new album, and I asked, okay, what's the approach? He's like, I'm still leaning on Grin a little bit. I'm like, yeah, really? So
that's great.
You have an album called Punishment for Decadence. Maybe you should refer to that. So,
well, yeah, he went and joined Creator and put on, I'm thinking, here we go. Creators, they get even more awesome. But then they came out with Endorama.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Yeah. That, I asked Milla about that. He said it would never have worked because Tommy is a band leader and Milla is a band leader. And you can't have, two chiefs like that in the band. So that's sort of why that fell apart a little bit too. But we'll see if we'll ever get that new Corner album or not. It's been a while since they reformed and nothing yet, but hopefully it's not like, Grin has its moments, but they'd be advised to do something like No More Color or Punishment or RIP, but I'm not holding my breath. Or even Mental Vortex, which I think is great too.
One thing, there was a pattern that became quite evident in the book. Super young band, eager for a contract, signs a greatly unflattering contract. And then bands like Sabbat, Celtic Frost, Halloween, they struggled with this greatly over time. Where bands like Tankard, Running Wild, they seem to just kind of go with the flow. Do you think where the problem lies is the first bands I mentioned started to get more of a following worldwide, where Running Wild and Tankard were more regional?
Yeah.
Tankard is just kind of like, hey, we're going to party on the weekend and play some shows. So they didn't really give a shit about the shitty deal.
We look at Running Wild. They've been over here once, right, on the Celtic Frost Voivod tour. They were booed off the stage, according to many reports, and left the tour early. Rolf Kasparek told me, it was just time to go home. But really, the story, of course, is that they were, Carl sent them home because they were being so poorly received on that tour.
Yeah.
But ever since then, they've stayed in their lane in Europe, and look at them. They're still headlining festivals and putting out albums every now and then. And of course, everyone just wants to hear Under Jolly Roger over and over again, which is Port Royal. But that's fine. And Tankard too. I don't know if you think of bands like Tankard's interesting, because if you think of a band like Korpikalani, it's like Finnish drinking songs. So why can't a German band with all their great drinking songs and songs about alcohol never translated well over here? I can never figure out why, because I thought, they always had great vocals and they were
Chemical Invasion's a rager. That's a great album. Morning After is a rager. I love those albums. The first three albums are great.
Yeah, those early Tankard, even today, their albums are strong too. I don't know. I don't know why they never translated over here. But yeah, I think you're right. And, Tankard was helped that they always had strong management with Buffo Schneidelbach, so he always helped them along the way. So I think that had a lot to do with it too. So
just thinking off the top of my head, was Tankard among the German thrash bands? Tankard was the one that had a real strong sense of humor in their music, which made it a little more akin to some of the American thrash bands. Did they just kind of get caught in between where they sounded a little too American for the Germans and a little too German, or a little too German for the Americans or something? I mean, because it's a good question. They should have been more popular.
I always thought the alcohol angle was pretty cool. Actually, I thought it was pretty cool. I mean, granted, we all know what drinking does, and we, this is not a PSA announcement here or anything like that. Sure. But for the metal scene, I always thought it was a brilliant idea that we have a band who likes to take the piss out of drinking songs and sing about alcohol and all those things. So I never understood why they never blew up bigger, at least over here. Over time, of course, I think in Germany, especially, they became part of the big four of German thrash. They got let into that little group with Sodom, Destruction, and Creator. Although I think there's still some people who don't want to admit them into that little group. But I think they deserve their standing in there based on their longevity. They never broke up. They never released any crappy albums. They never went off in a bad direction or anything like that. I just think that maybe people just never quite understood. Here's a happy German thrash band singing about beer drinking. I think that may be
because the other three, all those other three bands, especially early albums, they're really leaning into the black leather, the spikes, the almost satanic kind of image and stuff. And then here's the fourth band, which is beer, beer. It just made this thing wasn't enough like the others for them to get. People thought German thrash was this thing, and
Tankard looked like Anthrax for a little bit. They wore the Bermuda shorts and the goofy shirts and all those things. And I think that's why they may have fallen short and over.
And it seems like they would have fit. I mean, because Anthrax and some of those other, the skate look and everything. Those bands did well for a period of time, having that sense of humor in their thrash with that look, but it didn't quite click for Tankard with the beers. I agree with you. It seems like it was a slam dunk idea that somehow completely missed the rim.
They may have been just ahead of their time. Actually, had Tankard come out now in this environment, maybe they do a little bit better for themselves. I'm not sure. To that point, though, let's not discount what Tankard has done over there. I mean, I have a Tankard coaster here, that I use still. So, let's not discuss.
Oh yeah, no, not selling them short, like you said.
But I agree with you, Alan. They could.
They've had a great run. It's just it's weird, like you said. They're still kind of considered number 4 in the big four. That some people still want to have them at the kids' table, which I just don't get.
Yeah, because let's think about Destruction. The least successful human cannonball. I mean that should knock them down.
You said it.
That could knock them down a good. You could probably devote a whole episode to that album and that whole period of destruction.
No, we're not going to talk about it.
I remember going to Metal Fest when they were called over there. It was during that album cycle, and they had a guy singing. He kind of looked like a grunge singer, and there was just like a rain of garbage being thrown at him, and he's trying to laugh it off, and it was bad. It wasn't Destruction at all. It wasn't even remotely close to Destruction.
Yeah, it's not Destruction without Schmier, and now Mike Siffinger's out of the band, so
it's the Schmier project now. Yeah.
I don't know, but then Schmier says he writes all the songs, so I guess we'll see how it sounds.
Right on.
Yeah, who knows? But
so one other question, David. I know we want to get to albums and stuff like that.
I have a couple more, but yeah.
I've got at least one more. Something that came out in the book. And I thought you chronicled this really well, was that early on, Walter Beck really seemed to have a knack for identifying these bands that were going to be unique and could have a unique image, and they would find their place. And I think that's really exemplified by how well the Noise roster has held up and has all these legacy bands. But as you got into the 90s, he really seemed to lose his way. He lost that touch. And what happened? What happened? That because when as you got further and further on, it's just like everything he was picking just was an absolute disaster. It completely went the other direction. What did you ever get a sense of? What changed that made him sort of lose? He had his finger on the pulse,
Yep.
And then he had his fingers somewhere else that was not on the pulse. What happened to Noise?
What really hurt Noise was the Halloween court case. The start that was a draining experience, going to court all the time, going to battle with Rod Smallwood and Iron Maiden's management, and losing your highest selling, most popular band really took the shine off of Noise for Carl. And then he tried his hardest to establish a strong presence here in the States, but the New York office never really got going outside of a few years, and then he shifted operations to California in the mid '90s and really tried to tap into new metal, and ended up with Tura Satana. So we know how that and Terry B and everyone there, so that didn't go very well, but I think it's a combination of that, and then just other labels cropping up in the '90s, right? I mean, Century Media got going, and Nuclear Blast and Relapse. SPV picked up steam too, and some of the majors were still around, so they were tapping into Carl's talent. And even in the forward of the book, and Hansy told me this offhand, they were very interested in signing to Noise. I mean, that was like Blind Guardian's dream to sign with Noise, but then. They talked to some other people, and I didn't connect the dots, but I'm sure they were so close with Kai Hansen at the time. Kai probably told them, hey, you may want to think twice about signing to Noise. Maybe had Blind Guardian signed.
Kai was on this album.
Oh yeah, Tales from That World. That's impeccable. Yeah, I mean, it would have been for that album too. So I think that may have had something to do with it too. But Noise still through the '90s, they made it through. They Stradivarius was fine. Camelot did well too. And Virgin Steel was okay for the most part. The Marriage of Heaven and Hell Part 1 and 2 were their best ones. So Noise did have its moments there, but I think the Halloween court case and just more competition sort of just took the wind out of Carl's sails, and metal was no longer this innovative thing too once we got to the '90s, right? I mean, thrash had already had its day. He hated death metal. He would refuse to sign any pure death metal bands. So I think those things really hurt Noise. Maybe had Carl expanded into the death metal scene a little bit, that may have helped the label too.
Okay, makes sense.
Well, having such candid contact with Carl and the bands that were involved in Noise, did you come away with this whole experience with any different opinions of some of the people behind the music after having the access to the behind the scenes details?
If anything, I just respect some of these bands more than I already did. I mean, I grew up, worshiping these bands, and I was definitely that dude who stayed in his room as a teenager, reading Metal Maniacs and listening to CDs all the time, and a lot of them were Noise bands. And then to get to chronicle their careers, I didn't come with a bad taste in my mouth out of any bands. Actually, I was really worried that I would a few years ago. But you sort of go into that with any book, right? With any time you interview someone, if someone's a real jerk to you while you're interviewing them, you may be less inclined to listen to them. But thankfully, nearly everyone was really nice to me, and I have unlimited respect for these bands, especially the ones that are still going and are still successful. Like Tom with Triptychon and Halloween and Creator, and Kai with Gamma Ray and Stradivarius are still going. Camelot still doing great. So
Rage
Running Wild. They're all still around. Not many Noise bands, those key Noise bands, not many of them have broken up permanently. So I think that's a testament. Carl knew what he was doing. People can question his business motives, and he was not a great businessman all the time, but he knew what he was doing from an A&R perspective. And I really don't think, and I think I point out in the book, we may never see a run like that again from another label of signing that many great influential bands. I think that time has probably passed in the metal scene, unfortunately. We'll never have that golden era that was around in the 1980s. I think that has since passed.
Marty, did you have one or another question?
I just want to say, from reading the book, I mean, I had little knowledge about the record industry, and as such a diehard fan of Noise and the bands that it cultivated over the years, I was pretty shocked at the way Walter Bach treated a lot of these guys. I mean, granted, he saw them as kids. I get that, because a lot of them were. But, the way he talked down to Milla, the way he treated Tom Warrior, the way he, you know, just didn't. I mean, he treated it as purely a business. I get that now in reading the book, but I don't think he had the insight to see what these bands would become. And he was kind of shitting where he was eating, you know, treating these people so poorly. It was a shock to me, to be honest.
I do not disagree with you there, and that's, you know, that was sort of born from Tom's first Celtic Frost book, and I had to find out for myself if that was happening with other bands. And yeah, I mean, Miller got it really bad too, because he just wanted so desperately to get out of Essen, Germany, and make something out of himself. You know, sort of a deal like Carl says, okay, Miller say jump, and Carl, you know, that sort of adage, you know, jump how high, you know, something like that Miller would do. So yeah, I think it's unfortunate how some of those bands were treated, and unfortunately, it probably wasn't limited to Noise too. I mean, a lot of bands were treated that way throughout the 80s and 90s, and hopefully that's not still happening today. But that was a difficult part of the book, still reading about how some of those bands who are legends, how they were treated in the early days, but you know, they persevered still.
Yeah. Other people have had that reaction to one of my friends that also really loves the Noise roster. You know, when I told him the book was out, he literally, you know, he ordered it that afternoon because he was, you know, was like, hey, great, I'll get something to read on the plane. He got like 2/3 of the way through it. He was just sending me angry text after angry text. He's like, I can't believe what an ass this guy was sometimes. He just really, really, like Marty said, physically upset to the point that he had to vent it out. He's like, I can't believe how he treated you. Jesus, what was with this? So yeah, it really strikes a kind of a, you know, very visceral reaction with folks. That's what some of those bands went through.
It's also a testament. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Marty. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, it's a testament to Walter himself knowing that was out there and still being okay with this book happening without his control in it.
Like I said, I told him more times than I can count that you know, some of the bands are going to say some not so pleasant things, but he's like, okay, that's fine. So I think he's okay with his legacy, and I got to hand it to him because that was a very selfless thing too. You know, that's knowing that someone is putting something in the book that's not so flattering about you. I mean, it's human nature. You may not want that to happen, but I have to hand it to Carl. He was okay with it.
Yeah, a lot of people, wouldn't want to have anything to do with that, and he obviously was game for it all.
Yeah, and I was about to say, Marty, that's you know, we talk about Milla. That's been on my list. Like the next book, I think Milla deserves to have his own book and just tell the story. So I have been in touch with Milla, but it's very slow going, and we've agreed on some ideas for a book, but nothing like to go forward and do anything. But I think Milla would tell a fantastic story about his career and some of his experiences.
It started when he was a teenager. I mean, he's been in the trenches since he could even drive a car. Probably.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think Milla would be a next great one to do, but we just can't quite nudge him along enough to do it. So hopefully, you know, I thought the pandemic was the perfect time to do it. And I emailed him, you know, probably around, you know, March, April of last year with the idea. He said, yeah, that sounds great. Let me think about it. And that was it. I haven't heard anything since. So that was over a year ago. So, yeah, that's right. Milla doesn't like to talk about the past. Other people have told me that too. So I think that's sort of where a lot of that stems from. So could be a thing where once his career is over that he may want to do. I don't know, but I think he would be perfect for his own book.
Okay, that's all I have, Alan. Are you good?
I am very good. I just want to say in closing that it may sound a little corny or fanboyish, but thank you for writing that book. I mean, it's a label a lot of people really did have a strong connection to in forming their tastes and their whole listening experience. A soundtrack for their youth. You know, when I heard the book was out, I was ordering it within 5 or 10 minutes.
Me too.
Right.
Other people, I told us, hey, somebody wrote a book about noise. They're just like, just send me the title. I'm on Amazon right now. I mean, it's a book people really felt like they had to have.
It is, folks. If it's still available, go out and get it.
Oh, it's still available. Plenty of copies available on Amazon.
Cover by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even if you're not an incredible fan of some of those bands. Some folks aren't. It's maybe before their time, or they like more extreme stuff or something. It's still a very interesting read, just seeing how those bands, went through their formative years and got where they are today. If you're a heavy metal fan, these bands, they're legacy bands, and it's interesting to have their history documented. So it's a good read, even if German metal is not your own cup of tea.
Yeah, I appreciate that immensely, and yeah, it was a true labor of love. I still get nice emails quite a bit from people who have read the book and shared their stories. I had one guy who lives in Quebec City send me a list of all his of his thoughts on the book too, and so
nice.
I've thought about doing like a second edition of the Noise book, but we'll see about that down the road here. But
Sweet.
Yeah. Yeah, someone asked about the cover with Michel from Voivod. Yeah, Michel from Voivod did the cover. It's clearly his style to do it there. I mean, you could pick that up from a mile away. I mean, he was such a joy to work with and such a nice guy. And there's another band too, Voivod was on the Voivod was treated fairly well on Noise, I would say. They didn't really have too many bad things to say, but then they went on, and their major label years were a little up and down here, but it's still the Noise era, I think, is what people go back to the most there. So working with Michel was a real pleasure. He's a great guy.
Well, see, wasn't the first, Nothing Face a Noise and
MCA?
Was it? So I'm sure Carl was quite happy with the checks he was getting.
Yeah. So Nothing Face was in Europe, I believe was Noise, but MCA got the band over here. So that's how we got Astronomy Domini, if I pronounced that correctly, the Pink Floyd cover on Headbangers Ball and everything like that. So yeah, but Voivod was another good one, but they're not, Voivod was on Metal Blade before Noise. That was one of the rare cases.
But they worked together. Metal Blade Noise worked together though for a little bit.
Yes, they did. So I think that's how that all came about too. So yeah, it was a rare case where Carl didn't initially sign a band and then they joined Noise, and it worked out really well. You can't beat those Noise era Voivod albums. They're incredible.
No, classic, eternal classic.
Yeah, classics, absolutely.
Well, we might as well get into it. Let's talk about some of our favorite German metal releases and or bands. David, do you the honor of starting this out?
All right. Marty, you just held up the CD a bit ago of Blind Guardian, Tales from the Twilight World, but I'm going to go to the next one, which is Somewhere Far Beyond. I don't know if, Marty, you have it handy there.
I can get it.
You have Follow the Blind there. I have it too.
I have most of them.
Somewhere too. I have all of them too, but I would say Blind Guardian, Somewhere Far Beyond is one of the most quintessential power metal albums ever created, from Journey Through the Dark, and the Bard song is on there too. Time, What is Time? And it's where they made Blind Guardian made the transition. There it is. Yeah, it's where because Tales from the Twilight World, let's face it, I mean, that's like full on speed metal. They're still sort of in like the speed metal phase there, and I love it too. But Somewhere Far Beyond is where they made that transition, becoming more of an epic band, I would say. So I think the quality back to back, the variety of the songs to production, and again, the Bard song is one of the most enduring songs of Blind Guardian's catalog, so you're not going to top that at all. And I remember getting that CD when I was in college at the time, and I had a tape deck in my car, so I had to, you record the CD to tape. I mean, I wore out that tape. I mean, that was my sophomore year of college. Because I commuted to school. I mean, I played that nonstop. So I'd say that's probably my favorite. We're not talking about Noise, because I could talk about Noise. I didn't tell you not to pick Noise. I figured me and Alan have talked ad nauseum about that. You can show whatever the hell you want. Yeah, I think Blind Guardian, Somewhere Far Beyond is at the top. My favorite Noise release, though, is probably Keeper Part 2, though, Halloween Part 2. I know everyone goes for Part 1, but I always consider Keeper Part 2 to be a little bit deeper of an album. And I know some people sometimes get a little bent out of shape about the more like happy and jokey songs like Dr. Steen or Rise and Fall, but I mean, come on, man, those songs are incredible. Who ever thought to put like a comedic value to heavy metal like
Mhm.
that. And
Well, you put that super catchy music, yet with technical proficiency, with that golden voice.
Yeah.
I mean, he could sing over
Mhm.
someone farting, and it would be awesome. You know?
his Kiski's voice at that age when he was 19 or 20, it may not get any better than that.
Yeah.
Like that.
It's
That
still
is
great, but man, then it was on fire
Yeah.
for sure.
that is like peak heavy metal singing. You could put him up against Dickinson at his peak or Halford or any of those guys, and Kiski could hold his own on those albums. So Blind Guardian, Somewhere Far Beyond, probably my favorite German metal, non-noise album. Halloween Keeper Part 2 is my favorite noise album.
Halloween's one of my favorite bands. Straight
Excellent
up.
choices.
Oh, yeah, great choices.
Yeah. Kiske is my favorite metal vocalist, bar none. The only one I can think of right off the top of my head that maybe you made a good point. I think yes, he could go toe to toe with Dickinson or any of those. What do you think about Jeff Tate? Could he?
Jeff Tate on The Warning. Tate circa The Warning.
Yeah.
Maybe like you put those two up against one another. Like I think because the Warning's my favorite Queensryche. I know everyone loves Mind Crime, but I think Warning is the best pound for pound Queensryche. It's their most metal album because I know Rage for Order they got off into a little synth 80s goth wave.
But it works so well.
It did. I mean, that's a great album too.
Yep.
But I say Warning, Jeff Tate on The Warning versus Michael Kiske. That would be a battle for the ages.
That's
Kiske, Keeper 2 era versus Jeff Tate circa 1984 on Warning. Yeah, I don't know who beats because Tate has an opera background and Kiske's just a freak of nature.
I can tell you someone that beats Jeff Tate. Daniel from Lost Horizon.
Ooh, yeah, I have those two Lost Horizons album, Awakening of the World.
Oh my God.
There is a band of unfulfilled potential right there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I heard that the main guy kicked him out of the band because he couldn't trust anyone with short hair or no hair. I don't know.
Is that true?
Something. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's like, whatever, dude.
They are the great power metal band that never was. Yep. I completely side with you.
I try to turn anyone that comes over to this house that haven't heard them, even if they're not into power metal, I'm like, okay, listen to this. If you don't get on board with this, you're not going to get on board with any power metal.
They had those wacky names to each other too, and this whole, like environmental bent to them. Oh, it was perfect.
It was perfect. The guitar work was insane, and the songs were so catchy, so uplifting and powerful. So
missed opportunity. So Lost Horizon needs to get back together.
Yep, absolutely.
Yep.
Alan.
Great picks, David. And just so folks watching and listening know, Marty and I have done top 10 favorites from noise before. So a lot of the stuff I may show tonight is going to be not German bands, but things that weren't on noise, just to kind of round out the German.
I cheated a little bit here and there. Sorry.
If folks cheat here, but that's okay. That's okay. But I just didn't want folks to be confused that we've been talking about the noise book for the first hour, and all of a sudden I'm showing everything except some of the noise albums. But yeah, we covered that in one of our really early stream episodes. So folks can always go back and watch that to find out what our top 10 noise picks would be. But David's picked some great ones. Somewhere Far Beyond was my first Blind Guardian album. I had kind of the same experience you did with it, that my friends and I had been reading about this, amazing German metal band in some, underground fanzines. Nobody was importing their stuff. There was no Amazon. There was no getting your hands on it easily. So we went to the local indie store, and my buddy had more money than I did. And he just literally told the guy behind the counter, just like, order me a Blind Guardian album. He's like, which one? He's like, I don't care. He either just said, whatever one you can get the fastest, I will pay you for it. And he knew us well enough that, we weren't going to stiff him or anything. And the one that showed up, it took him a month. We almost forgot we'd even done it. But after about a month, he called my buddy Matt and said, I've got your Blind Guardian CD. And we got out of class and walked, straight, didn't get lunch, skipped our next class, just walked straight down to the store, picked it up, and it was Somewhere Far Beyond. He took it home, recorded it for me on a tape. And that tape didn't leave my Walkman for months. Just amazing album. But, if I'm going to pick a Blind Guardian album as top of the heap, I am going to go with this one. This one is just possibly the purest example of German power speed metal that's ever been recorded. It's just blazing all the way through. Like you said, the next album somewhere, yes, it's more varied. It shows them moving into that sort of big theatrical style, and they do it amazingly well. I love those albums they did in that style too. But this one, just for pure, unadulterated, headbanging, full-on speed metal fun. Just, from the opening, just, a few in lines when they're doing the big chorus, the morning sun of doom, and oh shit, every hair on my body just stands on end. Even now, 20 years later, hearing it, it's just like that thing just burns all the way through. You that whole string of Blind Guardian albums, you can't go wrong with. They're as good as anything that's come out of Germany that isn't Michael Kiske with Halloween. Cannot go wrong.
Such a unique voice.
Yeah, Hansen, he's very distinguishable, but good singer. Everything was firing for this band up, from the late '80s all the way up to the end of the '90s. It really was like this band could just do no wrong. Album after album after album.
Their quadruple tracking choruses, where they have 4 or 5 guys specifically brought in to do the chorus. That was so innovative that they did that on those albums. I mean, no one else was. I mean, Halloween did it, but it was usually Kiske doing it on his own. But if you read the credits, they had like 3 or 4 studio singers brought in to help with those choruses. So those quadruple tracked, those multi-layer harmonies on there. And the one you showed here, Alan. I know Kai Hansen pops up a couple times too, which is great too. I think the best one here is "Lost in the Twilight Hall" was probably the pinnacle.
He's amazing.
Piece of. Yeah, man, Lord of the Rings is great too, the song, but Blind Guardian having those studio vocals, man, that was incredible.
Yeah,
Nightfall in Middle Earth was my first buy. I think I got that when it came out. I liked it, but at the time I was so entrenched in black metal. I appreciated the talent, but it was coming back later to it where I really started to love it, and I'm really late to these albums. These albums here. I mean, Devin, who's a fellow YouTuber, Maze of Torment, bought these for me, and I am utterly shocked that I missed these 2 albums in particular. And this is straight up speed metal, and it's fucking great.
Yeah.
Band and Hansi's vocals. I mean, granted, he was playing bass at the time, and his voice, I think, got a lot more realized when he dropped the instrument, and he really came into his own. But man, these are just absolute classics. Absolute classics.
Yeah.
First song on Follow the Blind, I think it's Banished from Sanctuary. That is like the pinnacle right there. That is that song. And Valhalla's
on that album. Yep.
Oh, yeah.
You can't say enough great things about that song. Yeah. So, but I don't think they hit their stride though until this. They did not really get going until Tales from the Twilight World.
Yeah, the first 2 albums are great, but yeah, that with Tales, they just kick it into another fucking gear that very few bands ever find.
Yeah, I like how
it carries over.
I like how we're not talking about Night at the Opera or anything beyond
What's that? The Queen album?
I still kind of like it now, but when it came out, I didn't. Now I'm a little more in tune with that whole thing, but it's way too overblown. They got a little too artsy fartsy with it.
Hansi once told me that, Andre Olbrich, the lead guitar player, he's the songwriter. It's always him that has all the ideas, the crazy ideas, and Hansi has to reel him back in. If Hansi had his druthers, Blind Guardian probably wouldn't have done an album as complex as Night of the Opera. But you're right, Marty. That album has too many vocal parts, too many layers, too many things going on at once. And if you hear that right away, it's overwhelming.
Yeah. It seems like a band that was really trying to prove something they didn't need to prove. They were going too far over the edge.
Yeah, but where do you go after Nightfall, right?
That's the problem. Yeah.
What do you do?
You've hit, you've built all the way up to Nightfall. You've successfully made the transition out of being, a speed metal band to being, a power speed band to being this sort of, theatrical, classically influenced, neoclassical, whatever you want to call it. They slowed down, but they replaced it with these grandiose vertical structures. Even on Imaginations from the Other Side, which we haven't mentioned, which is an amazing album.
Oh, it's a great album.
And then you take, one of the pinnacle, sci-fi fantasy, works, you translate it just beautifully into, a full-length concept album where the songs work so well and the story works so well. What the fuck do you do next?
Yeah.
I remember on chat boards
more of everything is what you do next.
Again, it's sooner or later you're going to release something that's a step down from what you did before, and it's going to, when you've gotten that far up, even if it's not terrible, and Night at the Opera is not a terrible album, but it's going to feel much worse than maybe it is, because you finally have come down off that summit.
Yep,
I agree.
Yeah. Just as a random thing, I remember there was a rumor online in that interim waiting for Night at the Opera to come out, because people were saying, what did they do next? What do they do next? And there was a rumor that circulated for a while on like Metal Maniacs forum and stuff that the band was going to do a full-blown concept album on the Star Wars trilogy. And it was going to focus maybe like on Empire Strikes Back or something. And folks were just losing their freaking minds thinking about, they were going to follow up, the Lord of the Rings album with the Star Wars album.
That just doesn't work. I'm sorry, it's just not right. My luck, I would jump into that band on the Ewok album. I'd be like,
the morning son of Yub-Nub.
Yes. But I'm going to jump into this here with a...
I'm going to grab a drink, Marty. I'll be right back.
I have to thank Jurgen, who is in the chat. Thank you, Jurgen.
Hey, Jurgen.
Been a fan of Rage. Not a huge fan of that whole... the early noise stuff. I liked Rage. They wrote great choruses, but they their songwriting was a little herky-jerky, I thought.
It was.
This album, he was like singing the praises on this album.
Yeah.
I picked this up on his recommendation, and holy crap, this is a great, great, great metal album. Great. The songwriting around the chorus finally rose up to meet the quality of the chorus. And PB is a great chorus writer. And Rage has got a million albums. They just put out a new one. And some are better than others, but there's always a pretty good, tolerable level of consistency there. He said lineup changes, there's been a lot of shit going on with this band, but this is an achievement. This thing, the choruses are great. The songs are super catchy. It's long. I mean, there's like 13 songs on this thing.
Yeah.
But it's all good. It keeps me interested from beginning to end. And this album, I had the early stuff up to Secrets in a Weird World. This album made me say, okay, I'm getting all the Rage. I'm going to get the entire Rage catalog. And that's been a fun trip. They haven't all paid off, but this, holy crap. And the album that came after this, The Missing Link, is also really good. Not as good as this, but man, this is an absolute treasure in German metal as far as I'm concerned. Absolutely great. Great songwriting. Rage.
Very, very underrated band. The problem with Rage, though, is what were they? Were they a speed metal band? Were they a power metal band? Were they a melodic metal band?
They were interlopers. They just kind of did whatever,
Yeah. And it drove Carl. Carl always hated their image to start. I think he always had a big problem with how PV looked on for whatever reason. I don't know why, but I think that had a lot to do with it too. With Rage never had a defined image that Carl could sell. And you got to hand it to him. They're up to 20 studio albums now, I think, something like that. I mean,
crazy, yeah.
That's insane to think about how long they've been around. And but those mid-era noise albums they did are definitely very underrated.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
David, you're back on the clock here. There you go.
Back on the clock. All right. Give me 1 second. I think I'm going to pull something out of my collection. If Marty, if you want to skip ahead here, I'm going to pull something out here. I just thought of it.
No, go right ahead.
You do that. I'm going to go to the bathroom. I'll be right back.
Go right ahead. Yeah. Yeah. Rage is one of those.
I have it.
Okay. You're good. All right.
All right. So I don't know if you can call this a pure German metal album.
Oh, that's fine.
Not, but this, I think, I remember when Century Media started advertising this, saying this was this is like the successor to Halloween's Keeper albums here.
Yep.
And I was a bit of a latecomer into Ed Guy because I didn't like the name. Like, who names a band Ed Guy, right? So
it is a weird name. Yep.
I think I went to Prague Power in 2005 or 2006. and a lot of people had Ed Guy shirts on. And I asked someone there, like, what's the deal with Ed Guy? He's like, oh, they're this, that, and the other, but you need to check out Avantasia. And so that's what led me to Avantasia. So this, of course, is, this came out in 1999. This was Michael Kiske return to metal, after being away from the scene after so many years. But this is like quintessential power metal for me, with all the guests, how Toby Salmon's able to work all of them in so seamlessly here, between that and the production and the theme they have going on here. I think this and the Metal Opera Part 2 are impeccable. I know they did the Scarecrow, I think like 7 or 8 years after this. And
there was a break,
it was still really strong too, because he was doing Ed Guy. And I know someone here wisely put in the comments that Ed Guy is a very questionable moniker, and it no doubt it is. It did not work for them like Lynyrd Skynyrd worked for Lynyrd Skynyrd. So but I would say this for a German metal album. I know there's some. I'm looking at the credits now. There are a few foreigners on this record, but I consider this to be a German metal album because Toby Salmon's German. I would say this is one of my favorite German metal albums. Not on those.
No, it's a good one. Funny thing that has just happened. In the time I went to get this drink, my wife is watching, from one of the other rooms. She's just like, it's like, he talked about Blind Guardian before you did. Are you going to talk about Avantasia next? I was like, it's on the stack. I'll get to it later. And so you've just made her a very happy woman, because Avantasia is one of her favorite metal bands.
Pissing in Ellen's Wheaties.
No, it is absolutely fine. Avantasia is a cool project. The thing I liked that they did was, like you said, they bring in all the other vocalists to do the different characters and parts to their story. The story is, kind of a, very generic, fantasy.
Secondary.
Kind of
you don't think about the story.
No, don't sit and try to. I made the mistake of sitting and trying to read the whole story in the booklet, and that's rough. But it's like all the stuff that wasn't good enough to get published in a Dragonlance novel in 1991 or something. But the fact that he got all those different, recognizable vocalists to come in and do the voices for the characters made that such a cool concept.
It's funny.
And I wish
you mentioned the concept, Alan, and then if you look, they have the starring cast here. Kiske's name's not even on this. He's Ernie. So, they didn't even include Kiske's name in this. That's how much he wanted to keep a secret that he was re-emerging on the metal scene. So this gets a pick here. This gets spun quite a bit in my household, because my wife's in the Avantasia as well.
Yeah, it's a good pick. It's something I thought I'm surprised in a way other guys hadn't done that before with all the guest vocalists. Maybe Toby just was in the right place and had enough clout to bring them all together. For example, when DeFay did the Atreus albums with Virgin Steel, in that a little earlier, but in that same time frame, those are interesting albums. But those albums, I think, would have been a lot more. They would have held up better over time if he'd had other people doing some of the other characters rather than him singing for every character.
Could agree.
Which Avantasia, you can really tell exactly when another character is singing, because all of a sudden Kai is doing a few lines, or Kiske is doing a few lines, or he's had
Jeff Tate recently. I mean, Jeff Tate's never sounded as good as he has in recent memory on the Avantasia song he did a few years ago. And granted, Avantasia today, they're not really power metal; they're more like hard rock. Or
it's changed some over time.
They veered off from that, but he had
Alice Cooper, Claus Mean from Scorpions. All those great guys to sing, and it just works so well. It's just like how did nobody do this before? Really cool.
No one's done it better since.
Let's be honest with each other here in this little conversation amongst friends. Are you gonna fail if you surround yourself with such super talent? If let's say he put that album out without all the bells and whistles, meaning all these high power, awesome singers. I mean, I don't own any Avantasia. I recently sat down and watched some live shows with Bjorn and Kiske, and I was blown away. But the talent that was being displayed were comfort. It's like a warm, comfy blanket.
Yeah.
We know it's going to rule. I mean, Kiske is going to sing on this. It's not going to suck. Bjorn Land, it's not going to suck. But again, I don't know where I go on eBay and start looking at Avantasia. I don't know where to jump in. I'm is it because I bought that Ed Guy album that you recommended, Alan, and
Which one?
it's got the angel statue on it.
Oh, Theater of Salvation.
Mm-hmm.
It's half of it's really good. There's some really cringy shit on it though, like the ballad. I don't know.
Oh yeah,
There's some cringy shit on there.
He still does ballad. Like there's some ballads on this, and there's
some good ballads out there. There are, but there's some that make you go, ooh, I don't know. But anyway, that's my 2 cents. Again, I'm uneducated on Avantasia, but you know, you really can't fuck up if you surround yourself with the best talent on the metal planet.
Yeah, there's some merit to that. Yes, I would not disagree with you.
I'm sure there was either a Red Sox or Yankees lineup that completely collapsed under its own weight, but that's way outside the musical realm, so we won't we won't labor that point.
Okay, Alan, now that you can't show Avantasia.
That's quite all right. No, it's awesome that David picked that. I will go backwards in time with an old favorite that was on a much smaller label, but another band that held up really well over time and did their own thing, Stormwitch.
Yeah.
This is the first one, Walpurgis Night, 1984, on a little label called Scratch Records that had a few other metal bands from Germany, did some things on that label, but they must have been a pretty small operation because I've never come across more than 2 or 3 acts, and there were all albums that you don't find in the wild very much. But Stormwitch was very good at writing, heavy but very catchy songs. And of course, they did 3 albums in that style very, very well. And they would have been a good band for noise. They had, an image. And like you pointed out in the book a lot, that, Walter Beck liked these bands that had, some kind of a unique image. And these guys, very much got the gothic horror angle.
Sure.
Was
like
very much their thing.
Oh, those aren't all members on the back. I was saying it's like Earth, Wind, and Fire of heavy metal.
Yeah.
No, not quite. They've got a few stand-ins perhaps, but yeah, they've got they do the werewolf song, they do the Bram Stoker song, they that whole classic tropes of gothic horror, and put them into very good headbanging tunes. After the 3rd album, they changed directions and really leaned into the gothic side of it and got more lightweight sounding, but it still worked good. They still always were good songwriters. They just never had, the big label recognition backing them up. Other bands did. But yeah, this one for me, I always go back to this. This is, just the Battle Cry CD reissue. But yeah, Stormwitch is always one of those bands. When people say German metal, Stormwitch is going to be one of the first few bands that pops into my head. They did get, Stormwitch did get some props. They were one of the bands that got the Hammerfall treatment when Hammerfall was all the rage, and they covered Ravenlord, I believe was the track that got Stormwitch, their 15 minutes of Hammerfall-induced fame back on some EP or B-side.
All right,
Marty.
Well, I told myself I wasn't going to talk about Halloween tonight, which I've already kind of broken that rule, but I'm going to go with Halloween adjacent bands. Let's see how I did that. And we're going to go with Unisonic, which is Kai Hansen and Michael Kiska getting back together with their manager Costa and the other guy from Pink Floyd 69. Their first album is a little more AOR rock influenced. This album could have been Keeper Part 3. Yep. And this album is amazing. It rules. This is exactly what, it's not Gamma Ray, it's not Halloween, but man, it's a damn close. It's a mix of everything, and it's so good. It leaning more towards Halloween, the Keeper era for sure. But if you have not heard this album and you're a fan of Halloween, you definitely need to get on the stick and pick this up because it's a ripper, and Kiska sounds amazing. The songwriting's amazing. There's a lot of energy. There's a lot of variety. Great stuff. Great album. Not a bad song to batch.
You're totally right about the first Unisonic being very, AOR and not.
I like it. It grew on me at first. I didn't know what to think.
It's not a metal album though. It's not very metal. Though.
Yeah.
Less so. Yeah.
Yeah, and they have a song named after themselves called Unisonic, sort of as a way to say
everybody has to have their Iron Maiden song. You have to, or Manowar, you have to say your name in the damn.
Yeah, that's the name of your band. Yeah. Good pick, Marty.
Yeah, that it is a good pick, Marty. And something you said there, there's a phrase, and we've all heard it a million times over the years, to the point sometimes I'm sick of it. Keepers Part 3. For so long, that was, the mythical unicorn that everybody was waiting for, and every album that came out, never, whether it was a Halloween album or soon a new band that was going to be doing, the next Keepers album, you heard it over and over and over, and you'd hear the album or you'd check out the band, it's like, no, it's not in that league. That is one of the very few albums, that Unisonic album you just showed, it's one of the very, very few albums that I think can legitimately bill itself as a follow-up to that could be called Keepers Part 3. It may not quite be there, but it does deserve to be described.
Great on it. Yeah.
The Fire Off track, Your Time Has Come, that could have been Eagle Fly Free Part 2. It's got the same double bass, right in your face energy. It's so good. The harmonies are so dead on perfect and triumphant, and everything that the Keeper albums brought us, it transferred perfectly to this. I don't know how much Kai wrote on this, because I think the other guys did. I think the bass player wrote a lot of this stuff, but
Dennis Ward. Dennis
Ward. I don't know what it is. He channeled the spirit, and we talk about people wanting Keeper Part 3. People disappointed about the new Halloween album. I mean, that ship, and we've talked about this before, Alan, and we're talking about Halloween, so I failed. But anyway, that ship sailed and sank. I mean, that was a special time. There was a special studio sound they got. I think the new Halloween album really did an amazing job at channeling every era of Halloween without disrespecting any of the Darris era. I mean, he's still very much at the forefront of their songwriting crew. I mean, there are, 7 dudes in the band now.
Yeah.
And all of them except for the drummer are songwriters. Kiska didn't write anything on this, but everybody else is a songwriter in Halloween. And they all do a great job at, like Sasha. 2 of my favorite songs on the album, Golden Times, Angels, or too much. I mean, he channels the modern era of Halloween perfectly. He writes great, catchy songs, and with Kiska singing on those songs, it's kind of magical, and is a modern representation of what Keeper could have been, I guess, but a little different. But anyway, we have topic. Sorry.
Sorry.
Who's next? I just went.
I think I'm next.
Yep.
All right, I have to do this because I just want to get Marty's opinion, and same with yours, Alan. But we talked about Dennis Ward, and we talked a little bit about Andy Darris, but I wanted to hear everyone's thoughts on this. Would be the Darris era album that I would go to first for Halloween. I know it's the first with them, but I think it's special for a lot of reasons because of where the band was at the time. Think about it. They put out Chameleon a year prior, and we know what Chameleon's like. It's basically a mess. It has no cohesion whatsoever. It has one good song on it, which is Giants, which Michael Wyckoff wrote, which is about Carl, actually. So there's a trivia tidbit for you. But if we think about where Halloween was in 1993 and then to come out with this a year later, I think this is a tremendous feat. It's a great display of songwriting. Darris sounds nothing like Michael Kiske. He doesn't try to. He's his own dude. There's not a bum song on here. I love Perfect Gentleman. They played it on the tour. The whistling, I mean, it's freaking incredible here. There's a song about video games here called "The Game Is On."
Yeah.
The story behind that was when Halloween was in their court case against Noise. Michael Wyckoff hated being in Hamburg, Germany so much, so he moved to New York City, and he started living with he got a new girlfriend and lived with her in New York City. He was bored out of his mind, and he got addicted to playing Game Boy. And so out of being addicted to playing Game Boy, he wrote the song "The Game Is On." So there's a little backstory on that as well. But I think from top to bottom, Better and Raw is great. Time of the Day is great. Marty, before we jumped on, we talked about Seven Sinners being good, and
I listened to it today. I love that record.
My God-Given Right's good too. But if I had to choose a Darris era album, I would choose Master of the Rings. I just think from where they were coming off and the circumstances, they have new guys in the band. They got 3 new members. They got, well, not 2, I should say. They got Darris and Uli Kush. Roland Graphow was still in the band too. So I think this is my pick for the Darris era.
You want my opinion on that album?
Yes, please.
That album is amazing, and there isn't a bad song on it. And my personal favorite on that album is Why. That
Why?
song,
Yeah, that's a great one
there
too.
is a groove and a feel to that song that is just kind of magical, and it's a very kind of a Christian song, and it's just that album is great in every way, shape, and form. Andy Darris saved Halloween. He did. They pulled it off again. You do the unthinkable. You get rid of your singer after building a fan base. That's the death knell for most bands. They did it after Kai Hansen did an amazing job. I worship early Halloween with Kiska. They went up a bar, and I don't know if Darris is a rise in talent. I think he's a lateral move. He's very talented in different ways than Kiska was. He's an amazing songwriter.
That's it right there.
It inspired me to buy some Pink Cream 69 albums. One is kind of glammy. The other one I got is actually quite good. It sounds like a Halloween album in a lot of ways, a modern Halloween album. I really can't tell you what my favorite. I mean, the first three with Darris are great. I think the first and the third, Better Than Raw, is a fucking awesome album.
Mm-hmm.
The song that Uli Kush wrote on that, Revelation, is an amazing Halloween song. Amazing Halloween song.
Yep.
Yep,
yeah, it's a good pick, David. And your description of it is very apt. It's an amazing bounce back album. It's a comeback, and they pulled it off very well because, like you said, that band was a mess prior to that.
They were broken. They were broken. They
were off the
broken
radar.
And lost.
They were off the radar completely. And that album, while it's not as good as the albums, from their heyday, it gets them back in the right spirit. It's good German power metal. It's got that same happy, upbeat tone that, Halloween is one of the few bands that's ever mastered really well. It's got those songs, like you said, like the Game Boy song, where they're kind of silly, but Halloween can always somehow make that work.
They're like the only ones that can get away with it. Yeah.
They are one of the only ones that can get away with it. Yep.
Yeah. We talk about, Martin and I were talking about the new album, the song The Robot King. I mean, who else is going to put like a Broadway swing part in a song other than Halloween? They're literally the only band that can get away with it. So,
yeah. Now, I will say, I'll disagree. I think it's got a few low moments on it. The album, I'm pulling up the track list now to double check. Yeah, it's an album that it starts really good. You've got Soul Survivor is very strong. When the Rain Comes is good. Marty, I like Why a lot too. It's more of a ballady kind of song, but it's very nice. But I think it hits a real roadblock after that. That 7 minutes of Mr. Ego sucks a lot of the energy.
That's about Kiska.
That's about Kiska.
Yeah.
Whatever it's about, it's 7 minutes too long. It's a real flat song for me. And after that, it's up and down. There's good songs after that. I like the whistling on Perfect Gentleman. Again, it's a fun, little, catchy Halloween tune. Towards the end, I think it loses some steam. Take Me Home. It has a very...
I like that song.
Alibi is good.
Yeah.
Secret Alibi is fine. Yeah.
Even in the middle of a heartbeat, it's a cheesy ballad. It's good. And Still We Go, they end on a high note.
They end on a high note with Still We Go. But yeah, there's some. There's sure to be a few misses in the rest of it. It's a good album. It's a good bounce back, but it's got its flaws for me.
With the exception of the new album, every Halloween album has a ballad on it. Do you know why? Because Michael Wyckoff says no rock album is complete without a ballad. That is his hard and fast rule within Halloween.
It was a conscious decision on the new one not to include one. They wanted to make a statement. Yep.
Yeah. And I think it worked out fine. I don't think it needs a ballad.
God, the album's so fucking good. The new album's anyway, I'm shutting up. Don't get me started. Fucking so good. Halloween's great. And even the Darris albums that people hate, I find a lot of good in all of them. Yeah, as they go on. I mean, even My God-Given Right. They could have trimmed a song or so off the end. There's like a special edition I bought. It's like in a giant book. It comes with like 3 or 4 extra tracks. Even those are good songs. I was like really surprised. I'd never heard them. There's so much. It's really kind of hard to screw up when you got so many good songwriters in the band, all going towards the same goal.
It's just a matter of choosing. I would love to have been the fly on the wall when they were choosing the songs, like who gets cut and who gets to stay on that new album.
Have you heard the Japanese edition of Halloween?
I have not, no.
I spent $60 on it because it had 2 extra bonus tracks.
Ooh.
It's got the song they did when they got back together. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head.
United.
Yep, it has that on it. And there's another song after that called "We Are Real," which it's got Kai starting off singing on it. It starts off with a very Ramones-ish intro, and it kind of gets better. It's kind of a cheesy song. It's not. I'm glad I have it, but that could have maybe been on the cutting room floor. But
who wrote it?
I don't. You know what? I don't know. I didn't get into the book. That's the only one I don't know who wrote that one. But yeah, there's definitely check it out. It might be online somewhere. It's called "We Are Real."
We Are Real. All right.
It's not a great song, but it's cool to have. Yeah, here we go. Sorry, Marty's a super fan. I am.
Yeah.
Anyway, who is Alan's next? Yes.
Yep.
I love that album, David. Good choice.
All right.
All right. Let's touch on one of the real sort of early milestones in German heavy metal that got glossed over later in the decade and shouldn't have. This is, one of German metal's early successes, Restless and Wild. This album does, has so much of an influence on things that come after it. People forget about Accept sometimes, I think. They think of it, it's the balls to the wall video band, and think of them as like, this kind of, one-hit wonder that's a little bit of a meme. And they forget, how much good material they had and how much of an impact they had very early in the 1980s with other folks. Fast as a Shark, was, early speed metal perfection. That's really showing bands how to play at breakneck speed and make it work so well that it's tight. It doesn't sound loose. It's not sloppy. But yeah, and again, the band had, it's a legacy band. They were around forever, but they're also one of those bands that a lot of people just overlook. The name is kind of weird to an American ear. It doesn't always strike you as a band that's going to be heavy enough. You've got, the weird cover art on Balls of the Wall and stuff, but you got to, sometimes you got to go back and revisit the classics, where it all started. And, German heavy metal, it has its roots in Scorpions and Accept and those bands, that predate anything that from the Noise roster. So giving some love to Accept. And this is a funny press on Green World, just for the collector folks out there that like such things. It's a red vinyl version that I found in a used store ages ago. So yeah, kind of neat looking. I had the record already, and I noticed that when I looked at the back cover, like, my copy's not on Green World, so I pulled it out to look at it. I was just like, "Oh, you're coming home with me." So yeah, wanted to make sure Accept got some love while we were discussing the highlights of German metal.
I'm kind of a late convert to Accept. I've got that Restless and Wild. I've got I bought Balls to the Wall at a record show for like $5 and was quite surprised at how good it was. I mean, I was always kind of lukewarmish to Balls to the Wall. It's kind of a cheesy song, but the rest of the album is really solid, and it makes me want to investigate further. I listened to a few songs off their new album, and it surprisingly is quite good. I was quite surprised.
Yeah, I don't know their new material at all, and it's probably bad on me that I don't. But yeah, you go back to the Breaker album and stuff. Yeah, there's a lot of quality metal there that just kind of, as thrash and death metal and everything came in, that stuff just kind of got buried in the sands of time so fast that it was really kind of sad.
Okay, I'm gonna do my last Halloween tangent band. Sorry. This I have to blame Alan for this one as well. He told me to check out Master Plan, so I did. This is Roland Grapau, who was thrown out of Halloween for stealing from the band.
I can hear my wife squealing in the other room. She's so happy right now because she loves that album.
I still got it. Both of these albums, this is the first one I got, their debut, and Bjorn Land, I'd never really heard him sing before, and he has got a raspy, bluesy tone. This sounds like power metal Foreigner to me. And this album, there's a couple cheesy songs on it, but man, the songwriting is great. The singing is fantastic. Absolutely great German power metal in the spirit of Halloween, maybe a lot bluesier. They embrace more of a bluesy tone thanks to Bjorn's vocals, but Absolutely great. I think, Alan, you said don't really venture much further than this. I don't know if there's much
No,
more.
agreed. No, you don't
But-
go past those first two. Yorn left after Aeronautics, and they replaced him with Mike
Mike
Torelli.
DeMeo.
Mike DeMeo, thank you, from Riot on
Yep.
their album, which is okay. Yorn
Yep.
comes back for a less than inspired album. He leaves again.
Yeah.
Then they get the dude from Matt Vance. Now it's okay, but Martin, I couldn't agree with you more. This top to bottom, there's not a bum track on here.
Mhm.
Land's doing his Coverdale across this
Yeah.
album. There's plenty of times where he thinks he's David Coverdale.
And he's good at that.
and he's great at that too. But this was great because those guys got booted from Halloween for a variety of reasons, as Marty was saying. Wyckoff kicked them out, based off the Dark Ride album and some business things that weren't working out very well with them. So this is sort of their revenge album in a way too. But yeah, from that's a great choice, Marty. I gotta say this from top to bottom is a great. There's some great songs on here. Sail On is great. Kiski's on this too. Let's not forget Kiski pops up on this.
He is?
On Heroes.
Fuck, I didn't know that.
Yep.
Kiski's on the song Heroes.
Right on.
Kiski was their original choice to front this band.
Oh my
And he
God, that
turned
would have
it
been
down.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
that would have been
So-
made him even more pissed.
Yeah, so they got Yorn, which I think worked out in the end. But Roland Grappow is a very good songwriter. We talk about Pink Bubbles Go Ape. The only two good songs on Pink Bubbles Go Ape are The Chance, and why is the other one escaping me now? That there's another good song on Pink Bubbles that Roland did that are the only acceptable
Well,
ones.
Kiska
there.
wrote Kids of the Century, and that's a great song.
That's a good song too. Yes, I agree. But yeah, that's a great choice. First two, don't venture beyond those first two Master Plan albums. Couldn't agree more.
I see they did like a Halloween covers album too, Pumpkin something or other. Pumpkin Tracks, I think it was called.
Pumpkin Tracks.
Mhm.
Well, those are the albums that Roland wrote while he was in Halloween.
Yeah. I figured it was
It's
stuff he wrote, but
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. To be fair, the third master plan is not terrible at all, but because I like Mike DeMeo's voice a lot.
I like
think
Mike
he's another
DeMeo
very
too,
strong
sure.
singer. But yeah, it doesn't measure up to the first two. I mean, you've got a new singer. It obviously feels a bit different. And then with Yorn coming back, yeah, they had lost the magic at that point. It just didn't
Absolutely.
click anymore. Yeah, it's another good example, like with Lost Horizon. It was a band, and Master Plan was building some momentum. I mean, they were getting some attention with those first two albums, and it got flushed away.
Yorn leaves. Yeah, once Yorn left, that was it.
Yeah, they never could quite get it back.
Yeah.
all right. David, your return. The return.
All right, another. I detect a theme. This episode should be called Halloween and Halloween adjacent band. Here, so I'm gonna go with Primal Fear.
Oh, there you go.
Here, the much derided, occasionally derided Primal Fear, Nuclear Fire. Granted, if you choose one Primal Fear album, you're probably choosing all of them, right?
Yeah.
They're basically interchangeable in a way, but I
bit.
choose this because of Angel in Black, which is the first song here. But I always thought that they were like the German Judas Priest playing Painkiller, right?
Totally.
They're sort of in that template. They took what Priest did on Painkiller and made it a little bit more power metal. Rolf Scheepers, of course, as we know, auditioned. Well, he claims there's been so much made about that story that he denies that he was ever in the running to replace Halford. He really was. He was on the short list between Ripper and DC Cooper and himself. So, but clearly, Judas Priest inspired German power metal here.
Absolutely.
Primal Fear is one of those bands, they're never going to put out a bad album, probably because they haven't really written any new songs in a long time. They sort of suffer from that syndrome here. But I'd say, at least for a strong classic German power metal album, I'd go with Nuclear Fire from Primal Fear.
I gotta say, I mean, you talk about Priest influencing German power metal. I mean, Gamma Ray Somewhere Out in Space and Power Plant. You listen, like Power Plant has got Judas Priest all over that.
Kai Hansen loves Judas Priest.
Yeah, Kai is wearing his influences on his sleeve totally on those albums for sure.
Yeah. Same with Running Wild. I mean, Running Wild takes their name from a Judas Priest song.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yep.
All right, Alan.
Okay. Yeah, one of the unsung bands that I thought, again, they did some cool stuff, and then kind of lost their direction and moved on to other things. Heaven's Gate, Living in Hysteria.
Heaven's Gate, yeah.
I love this album. Great German power metal sound. Every song, this is another one that leans, a little, in the AOR rock direction, but not enough to turn you off. It's it's firmly more in that unisonic side of things. Songwriting is just great. Good performances. Every song has its own vibe and feel. The songs are very very unique, very distinguishable from one another. It just did really good. This was their second one. They'd done one out. The first album was okay. It was a little hit or miss, but yeah, this one really, really clicks good. After this, they got kind of weird. They started getting more and more actually bluesy with some of their stuff. The third album wasn't bad. They had a live album with a decent track selection, but then they had some EPs, and they were getting a little bit into the two. They were doing songs that had much this bluesy lounge vibe, and it was almost like they were almost intentionally trying to be quirky or something.
Yeah.
It didn't sit quite right, and so they ground to a halt. Sasha, of course, went on, has done had a good career, in production, with a lot of working with a lot of power metal bands. So he's an excellent guitar player, but also turned out to be an excellent producer. So still had a great career. But yeah, this is an album I still go back to and enjoy. I think it's one of the better power metal bands or power metal albums that came out of the 90s that, they just didn't quite get there, but they left some cool music behind.
I got to say, the Heaven's Gate album cover, out of 5 million metal album covers that have dragons on them, I have never seen such a chill dragon.
Yeah, I was thinking that too.
It's taking it easy. I've always, just to go super nerd for a minute, I've always wondered a little bit if the artist wasn't inspired by the original artwork for Nicol Bolas from the Legends set of Magic the Gathering, because those actually Nicol Bolas would probably have been printed after this, so maybe it's the other way around. And whoever drew the artwork for Bolas was a little bit of a power metal fan.
Gate fan.
He was a little bit into Heaven's Gate because the artwork for the original Nicol Bolas card is very similar. It's the dragon kind of in that recline position with a pipe reading a book. It's a very similar
So is
idea.
that their mascot? Is his name Sherlock?
I don't think they lasted. They didn't last long enough to warrant a mascot.
Yep.
But it's a cool album.
No, actually, Wordvert, that's going to be a new subgenre of dungeon synth, Chill Dragon.
Chill Dragon.
You have Comfy
Actually,
synth, now there's Chill Dragon synth. Yep.
It's going to be on Drew, what is it, American Idol as Imagine Chill Dragons.
Right. All right, David.
All right. Not a Halloween adjacent band for once. Angel Dust, Bleed here. I remember this being promoted pretty heavily. I remember the Metal Maniac staff really being into this band. They had a period before this particular album came out, but once they got hooked up with Century Media, I wouldn't call this necessarily power metal. It's more just like a melodic metal album, and I always loved the vocals of Dirk Thurish on it. I always thought he was a great singer. There are too many ballads on this, though. I think there's too many soft songs here, but the heavier ones here, as I look at, Black Rain's great, and Never is awesome too. I think when these guys are heavy and they're not doing ballads, I always thought this was a really strong album. It sort of flew under the radar for a little bit. I'm not sure why these guys never had more of an impact here, but I sort of dumped them into the same bucket as Nocturnal Rites in a way. Like Century Media had those small spate of power metal bands that they were promoting at the time, and Angel Dust and Nocturnal Rites were around at the same time. So, but yeah, this would get my nod to. Very underrated album. They didn't do much after this. I think they put out one or two more albums, then they broke up, then they reformed. But this, I would say, is the peak of Angel Dust's career. Yeah, great choice, David. And you're right. It's not a headbanging power metal kind of band at all. It's a little softer, a little cleaner sounding. I thought they did very good. They had a little bit of a dark vibe about them. Not that they weren't trying to sound true grim cult or anything, but they just had this sort of little dark undertone that made the music good. They had really I forget their keyboard player's name, but
he always added really nice touches to the songs. He made really good little atmospheric touches to the music.
Keyboard player, you're right. The keyboard player added that little element, and he wasn't playing. He wasn't like Jens Johansson. It was very textured and atmospheric.
No.
I think that gave it a unique little angle.
Yeah, it did. But yeah, I remember that. That got a good push in Metal Maniacs. It was on some of the folks' like top 10 of the year list, and deservedly so. It was a really cool album. And I don't know what happened to the matter. The album after that, it seemed like it came out very fast and it needed some more work. Maybe I remember feeling like it wasn't. Really
I have the one that came after that too.
It's like Darkness,
Enlighten the Darkness. Yeah, probably. I think there's like 2 or 3 good songs, and the rest was sort of just filler.
I got a promo from Angel Dust back in the Maniacs days. Maybe it was a little later than that. It had an angel with a gas mask on the cover.
That's one after Of Human Bondage. And that one's not very good.
It seemed a little Seattle influenced. It was really like heavy, grooved out type of. And I was thinking, wow, I thought this was supposed to be a lot more along the speed metal lines, but
and like David said, they had life back. They did 2 albums back in the 80s on small labels. I think they're on Disaster Records or something with. And they're okay albums, but. Let's put it this way: they're not ones I pulled out to discuss tonight. They're not bad, but they're kind of generic in a way. But yeah, when they came back, it seemed like the band they had a little different sound, a little more personality. The comeback album before Bleed was Border of Reality, and that one had some faster songs. It still had a little bit more of a power metal gallop to it at times, and it was a very good album. But it was on a real small label, so it didn't get the attention that Bleed got.
Once they got on Century Media, that sort of changed things for them.
Yeah,
they're an underrated band, sort of like unfulfilled though. It didn't seem like they ever fulfilled their potential in a way.
Yeah. Those first 2 albums have sort of one of them is called To Dust You Will Decay, and I'm blanking on the name of the other one. They have a cult following, with 80s heavy metal fans, but I think some folks overrate them just a little bit on those early ones.
Great.
All right, Alan. You are up.
All right. Time to discuss something a little heavier. We interrupt your regularly scheduled Halloween Power Metal Love Fest to bring you Persecution Mania.
You bastard! That was.
You had your chance, Halloween boy. But yeah, you can't talk German metal without touching on the heavier side, because they made huge contributions to thrash, like we've already talked about some tonight with Destruction and other bands. Sodom's another one of those that's just had a long, persistent career. Never did anything with Noise to my knowledge. Maybe a later album was, but the early stuff wasn't. I like the Obsessed by Cruelty. I know some folks are really hit or miss on those earlier Sodom ones, and they're very rough. They are very rough. I think
they're very sloppy.
Very sloppy. For me, it's sloppy in the charming Hellhammer sloppy way, but I get why some folks don't like it. But on this album, they really tightened up and everything suddenly just clicked. And it's just like, what if Venom and Motorhead, fucked like animals and had a bastard child, and let's record that. And they did, and it's glorious. So yeah, it's always been my favorite Sodom album.
Yep,
probably always will be.
Hands down.
Yeah. It's not. I don't think there's even a close second for me personally.
Do you like that more than Agent Orange?
Yes,
do. Absolutely.
I like Agent Orange, but I just think that album. I mean, Persecution Mania. I mean, you got Nuclear Winter, Christ Passion, Electrocution. They're great songs. They really came out of that sloppy young guys figuring out their shit to embrace it. They like the viciousness, and there's like a darkness. There's like an evil darkness to it. But the songs just rage, man. It's just a really well written album. They're most lethal, I think, the most composed and lethal representation that embraced what they were to become and where they came from. That was like this is kind of like the tipping point for them.
Yeah.
I loved Agent Orange, but I mean, there was, some punky, silly stuff on it that I like. I mean, you could tell they were heavily influenced by Tank, maybe.
Sure.
I don't know. But yeah, good stuff.
All right, Marty, over to your turn, I believe.
All right, we can't get through this without talking about Destruction.
Of course not.
This was a big band for me, And these are my three favorites. I really like Release from Agony a lot, but it's just a weird, clean, technical. I love that album, but there's just something a little too pristine about the sound. I mean, this is my favorite, Destruction. Infernal Overkill. This, again, another evil thrash record. It's dark, it's fast, it's brooding. The songs are well written. You know, Bestial Invasion, Invincible Force. I mean, every song on this is a ripper. This album, again, I worship this album, but the sound of this thing is really weird. It's like sizzling, almost borderline clean sounding guitars. But they started to get a lot more technical, a lot more complex in their songwriting. It's a great album. I love the cover artwork. It's completely a totally unique take. I don't know. There's just always been something about this album cover that really stands out. It's a bold statement, but you know, you can't go wrong with these. I mean, even this, the American cover of this is, I think, oh wait, is this European? I don't know which one it is, but absolutely killer. Great stuff. Great band. They have somehow evaded the long hand of Noise International or Noise Records. Was this on? No, this is Enigma. These are Metal Blade reissues.
Yeah,
so I
SBV had them over in Germany, and
yep.
You know, like you said, Metal Blade had them in the States.
Yep. Great band though. I love it, and you know, I like some of their later albums too, but I don't think they all embrace the quality. I think there's been obviously there's the shitty era where Schmier wasn't in the band anymore.
Yeah, the post-Reformation albums, you know, All Hell Breaks Loose, and the ones after that, I thought were pretty good, you know, but they're not gonna
All Hell Breaks Loose was a really kind of a cool comeback album. Yeah. I thought there were some songs on there that really kind of captured that early spirit. The one after it, Antichrist was after it.
Antichrist, yeah.
It's a pretty good album, but I think All Hell Breaks Loose was probably the best of the Reformation albums. I'm sure people will disagree with me on that. I saw them on that tour, and it was great. They were great.
Yeah, I've been digging into some of those newer ones ever since Jurgen put out his Destruction career ranking things and playing through some of them. And there's good stuff in there for sure.
Yeah.
Still wrapping my head around all of it. I'm bad not to keep up with those bands when they come back, and then I have a lot of catching up to do. So
there's a lot of catching.
They're very prolific. I mean, out of the big three of the German thrash, they're the most prolific. You know, Creator puts an album out every 5 years. Sodom has actually been cranking out some stuff lately, but Destruction's usually, you know, every other year with a new album.
You know what? Creator's evolution is interesting. I like the new Creator, but it's very Swedish melodic death metal influence, and it's kind of weird. I don't know.
Well, yeah, Violent Revolution and Enemy of God no doubt have a bit of that Gothenburg vibe to it. Yeah. But Milla will tell you that those Gothenburg bands stole from Creator, so it's sort of like a full circle kind of thing. Like
I don't hear much extreme aggression in the Gothenburg sound. I just don't. Or
there were some melodies there once they got into Extreme Aggression and Coma of Souls a little bit, but yeah, it's not as nearly as melodic as those Gothenburg bands came. But yeah, those later day Creator albums definitely veer into the Gothenburg mellow death side, no doubt.
David, you're back.
All right, so we haven't talked about them too much today. And it is a Noise era album, but I was really racking my brain to think about which one of their albums I thought was the best, because they've sort of had a bumpy road. With some of their albums are better than others, but I'm going to take No World Order from Gamma Ray as my pick. I think this is their best from top to bottom.
Oh,
you could say
sorry.
You could say Power Plant is great, and Somewhere Out in Space is great.
Land of the Free is great.
Land of the Free is great, no doubt about it. But Power Plant is pretty front top heavy, I would say. Somewhere Out in Space, maybe sort of the same thing. But No World Order, I think is where Kai probably
it's a good album.
Best songwriting here, top to bottom, and they sort of tapped a little bit into those Blind Guardian style choruses a bit more on it too, so it's a little bit more epic in a way. And, also it's their last album for Noise too. So there's, a little, I guess I'm sure Kai was happy to be out from the shackles by then. But this, this is a Noise Sanctuary release. So by the time this came out was when Sanctuary had bought Noise. So they were under different management at the time. This gets my pick as the best Gamma Ray. Although, Marty, I do really like Land of the Free and Somewhere Out in Space. And even Heading for Tomorrow, the debut is pretty good. If we want,
that's kind of a confused. I don't know what I want to do with myself album though.
Yeah,
Heading for Tomorrow. Yeah, it's got some goofy songs in it too. It's definitely, you can't. It's funny, we talk about like what could have been Keeper Part 3. There's some songs on there that you listen to and you think, okay, these songs could have been on the next Halloween album here. But Rolf Scheepers does a great job on those first few.
He does.
Albums. But once Kai took over and started to sing, I don't know why they have this new dude singing with them. It's just like Kai do all the vocals here.
I think Kai's voice is kind of roached on some of the high register stuff.
That's why
I could be wrong.
Or
he's feeling self-conscious about it.
Well, he's never enjoyed singing, so that may be a factor as well.
Land of the Free is another one of those I could have thrown in the hat as Keeper Part 3. I mean, I think that
is the second one I was thinking of earlier. Yeah. The Land of the Free, because again, for years there, all me and all my Halloween buddies, we're waiting for it. And when we finally got my hands on that album, I remember calling some of them up and emailing them and stuff. Me like, if you haven't heard this yet, this may be the closest you ever get to Keepers 3. Go check it out for Land of the Free. I would probably. It's a good question, David. It's a little hard. Gamma Ray, again, they had a good, consistent streak there. Yeah, it's a little hard to pick a favorite.
Past Land of the Free, I don't think they've done a bad album necessarily. So they've all been of quality. It just depends on which one has the strongest songs.
Yeah,
I was really a big fan of their last one, Empire of the Undead. That album really, I thought, kicked ass. So the first song, Avalon, what a great song.
I'll admit I'm not a huge Ralph fan. His voice has never clicked with me with any of his bands, even going back, to his early stuff in the 80s. But in those first two albums, the third album, Insanity and Genius, he's getting there.
That's a good album. They kind of figured out what they wanted to do.
That album for me is very much a side A, side B album. The side A, it's just like this album is really starting to fire on all cylinders, and on side B, it completely lost me. But once Kai's back at the helm, you're right. It's just great album after great album. They've had a very good run.
All right, Alan.
All right.
Good pick, David. I'm not going to argue about any of that. That Gamma Ray shit's great.
Absolutely. All right. Another band that had a very good run and got absolutely the opposite of Gamma Ray. Gamma Ray, like you said earlier, David, one of the few bands that got a lot of attention through the 90s in power metal. Here's a band that got no attention in the 90s in power metal, but I kind of like them. Attack. A lot of it's sort of a one-man project. Very much masterminded, did several albums and really very solid German power metal, some faster songs, very good in the gallopy style, not full on speed metal like Blind Guardian or anything, but really doing good with that galloping power metal style. And I think they did 6 albums over about an 8-year span, and nobody paid a lick of attention to them. I've got a few of them. I don't have the whole catalog. I think the very last album, misses the mark a bit. It was kind of clear that this isn't going anywhere. We're kind of, wrapping things up. But so this is 7 years in the past. But is it the most outstanding power metal ever released? No, it's not. It's following a formula. It's doing what others have done before, but they do it well. If you're a fan of German style metal and you're trying to find those other bands that you haven't checked out, Attack is one that got really overlooked. And it's worth going back and checking those guys out.
Never heard of them. You always have to pull one that I've never heard of.
Nobody has ever heard of that. I almost can guarantee you, if it wasn't for one interview, they had one English interview that I'm aware of, and it was in the Sentinel Steel fanzine in the mid-90s. it was very clear. I'm drawing a blank on the guy's name. It's something like Ricky. He has a little bit of a funny name for, a German. English was very, very rough. But Dennis, who ran Sentinel Steel Zine, he really, talked him up, touted him. He got a few of their albums, distributed in the U.S. through his little, distro back in the 90s. And if it wasn't for that, I would be surprised if anybody on this side of the Atlantic ever knew anything about that band prior to the internet. Because, they got no attention.
Well, Aaron the Metal Theologian did.
Aaron knows all and sees all.
And Jurgen says he's wearing that shirt right at the moment. So,
Yeah, well, Jurgen is the archetype we all aspire to be.
True,
we know that by now.
All right. This, for me, I like their second album somewhat, but their debut album is masterclass thrash. As they went on, I've kind of checked in here and there on this band, and it just does not hold up. And that is Assassins, The Upcoming Terror. This album is an unhinged, almost falling apart at the seams thrash album, and it is so good. It's sloppy, powerful, interesting, unique vocals, really pretty savage German thrash that this came out on SPV. Doesn't really sound like a noise band, so I guess it makes sense that they never really ended up there, but what a great debut album, man. This thing just rips from beginning to end. Great stuff.
I don't know if I ever heard of that one, actually. Yeah, it has a tank. Someone said in the comments it has a tank on the cover, so that sort of validates it, right?
Yeah, typically if there's a tank on the cover, it's got to be decent.
Yeah, it's got to be okay, right?
All right.
Gotta love the tanks.
David.
All right, I'm going to go outside of power metal here for once, so we can escape power and speed metal. I'm going to go with Disillusion, Back to the Times of Splendor, which came out in 2004 via Metal Blade. So they are like a progressive death metal band in a way, not too far off from Opeth. They're sort of in that general ballpark here, but it's long songs, sort of that construct where the acoustic guitars are brought in a lot, clean vocals between gruff vocals here, lots of melodies and things like that. So these guys got tremendous reviews when this came out in 2004 and were poised to do some great things. And then they put out a stinker of an album 2 years later that was very experimental, and it sort of derailed their career for a bit. They got back together and put out an album out in 2019 that was excellent. They're now on Prophecy, I believe. So, but yeah, if we're thinking about outside of power metal, thinking of German metal, I would go with this one, Disillusion here. Very underrated album, great band, not a bump track here. Highly recommended.
Huh, never even heard of them either.
Yeah, I don't know that one at all.
Yep.
Alan.
Okay. Again, another German metal band that has gotten reclassified some over time, but really, really important to, putting German metal on the map long before any of these other bands were around that we've talked about. Scorpions. And I'm going to pick Blackout. The 70s stuff is great. I love a lot of that material as well. The 80s material, should not go overlooked. It's it produced a lot of radio hits, and for some folks that means automatically it's not heavy enough or it's not true enough or whatever. Fuck that. There's great songs on all those Scorpions albums up until you get to the later 80s maybe. Blackout, all kinds of good stuff. Dynamite is on here. Now just great, fast, energetic songs. One of the bands that really made the transition so successfully out of being a 70s styled heavy metal band to an 80s, arena, if you want to call it arena rock or hair metal or whatever, I don't care. It's really good. And it was heavy enough to appeal to headbangers. And the fact that they made it, commercially viable enough to become international superstars, good for them. I'm not going to hold that against them. But, if you've overlooked Scorpions because you just think of them as, the rock you like a hurricane band, again, you're doing yourself a disservice. You got to go
great
back
album,
to
though. Love It First Sting's a great album.
Love at First Sting is great. I could have easily picked that. That and this album are so close together. They're so similar that they're just part one and part two almost. But yeah, even the albums that come before this, where they're making the transition, all those albums like Love Drive that you sent me a while back, Marty. That's a really strong album. There's a lot of great stuff on there. You really can't go wrong with Scorpions through the first 15 years or so of their catalog. That's amazing.
Yeah, I guess what's the cutoff point with the Scorpions? Is Crazy World the last, redeemable album of theirs, or are you going a little bit further?
That's a good question. That is a very good question. Savage Amusement is not a great album overall. I haven't played it in years, start to finish. It has some good songs on it, but I remember feeling like it was a very tedious album to get through. But what came after it? Face the Heat, I have a little bit of a soft spot for.
Face the Heat. I remember that came out. Yeah.
Yeah, it came out at a time when that style of music was quickly falling out of favor. Everybody was moving on to the grunge thing or the death metal thing. But and I'm not going to claim it's a spectacular album. I haven't played it in ages. But I remember liking it and having a soft spot for it at the time. So I want to say Face the Heat. You can keep up with Scorpions through Face the Heat if you don't mind giving them a little wiggle room.
For me, I mean, I had to decide if it was Vicious Attack or Entrance that were my favorites, and I got to go with Entrance. I mean, the Scorpions are the cornerstone of German metal. I mean, Klaus has got an amazingly unique voice. This album for me, just from beginning to end, is just perfect. It's just a great Scorpions record.
Yeah,
I liked a lot of Uli John Roth's albums. I mean, he just had such unique playing style. What the Sales of Karen on Attack. What a great fucking song. I mean, that is just the weirdest out there riff, but it works so well. The guy was kind of like a visionary when it comes to that unique style. I can see why Scorpion's success wasn't going to work with him. He just had kind of a more progressive way of playing where, like Blackout and Love at First Sting it's more commercially viable.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
It was a different era.
They're a great band. It's a different era. I mean, I still like those albums, but Entrance for me is the best.
They're an album, Marty, you often point out, how Halloween just successfully kept replacing the lead vocalist with, another, very strong lead vocalist. Scorpions kept replacing amazing guitarists with other amazing guitarists.
Yeah.
This is a band that got rid of Michael Schenker and got Uli John Roth, and even after he left, they don't get as much attention. Yeah, they're really good. The guitar work on all those early and mid '80s Scorpions albums is fantastic. It's great stuff.
Good stuff. Yeah. And I'm up next. Okay, I'm gonna kick it to a little more death metal oriented, and one of my favorites from Germany, Morgoth. I'm a big. I like all their albums, even the weird Feel Sorry for the Fanatic, their Killing Joke album. I like that album. I like Odium. It's kind of weird, but for me, Mark Grue, I don't know if it's Mark Grue or Mark Grue. I have no idea. Grue. He's got an amazingly sick, disease-sounding voice, and this early stuff, this early Morgoth, there's no blast beats. It's just really good, solid, classic death metal, well-written songs with super sick vocals, and I always really like this band.
They're still around. I think they broke up a few years ago, right?
Didn't someone in the band die?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Karsten Otterbach, who is the guitar player, he passed away.
Yeah.
He was a manager throughout the 90s and 2000s for a good chunk of the Century Media bands.
Oh, right on.
And he passed away not too long ago. So I think he was a founding member of Morgoth.
Yep.
Yeah.
I know they went on without Mark. He started that band with the guy from Dimmu Borgir. I can't remember the name. Kind of a death metal thing.
Oh, Insidious Disease or something.
Insidious Disease. That's the one. Yep.
Yeah. That's all right.
It's all right. It wasn't mind blowing, but good.
He's a good vocalist. Yeah.
All right, David.
All right. I know who I'm going to pick now. I'm going to. All right. Off the power metal path here, Night and Gales.
Oh, right on.
So total Gothenburg ripoffs, without a doubt.
Big time. They sound like they're from Sweden.
They sound like they're from Sweden. You hit the nail on the head, Marty. They totally cop every At the Gates and In Flames riff known to man. You know, they were also on Nuclear Blast in the late 1990s here. But this one here is Five Scars, so this is like their Reformation album that came out in 2011. The guy's vocals here, you know, if we think about like great death metal or melodic death metal, you know, we could always go like Thomas Lindberg, who has like that real frothy sound in his voice here. But the vocals here are impeccable. The melodies are great. There's a little bit of melancholy and sorrow to them as well here. So Nightingales, I mean, yeah, let's face it, they're very much in that In Flames and Dark Tranquility vein, but pound for pound, this is probably their best one. Their 90s stuff is pretty good too, but this is good too. And I bring it up because Mark from Morgoth, I think, has guested on some of their recent albums. So that's what made me think of Nightingales.
Boy, their first album had a really cool cover, and then they kind of fell victim to the record company shitty album cover thing. Like Thunder Beast had a shitty fucking cover, and
I have Thunder Beast,
with the nails on it. And, I mean, they're really bad album. They'd be one of those deals if I was flipping through the racks and saw them, like, there's no way I'm coming home with that garbage.
So there's Thunder Beast, right? And here's Nailwork.
Yeah. Yep.
And then here's some dude who actually I don't look too dissimilar. Then that could probably be me.
That's you.
This is me 20 years ago. Granted, I had hair at the time, but yes.
Another label that went through that phase was Napalm Records. Everything that came out had like a naked, half naked vampire woman on the cover.
Yeah. And they had that surplus of, you know, buxom beauties fronting these 10-member goth metal bands. Yeah. That was the formula.
Yep. All right. Yeah, good pick, David. I think they were a band that they got lost in the Gothenburg wave.
You're a German band playing Swedish melodic death metal. That's
there you go. They're singing at those covers.
When everybody started playing Swedish melodic death metal, yeah.
The singer they were good. Photoshop. Sorry, Alan. I mean, you're
no, we're good.
All right, Alan.
Okay, let's get back on the power metal train for at least a minute, or more of a traditional metal train, but old favorite from the German metal scene, Brain Fever. Now, not the best cover. I've never had any fucking idea what's going on here. You've got naked dude, like, in the throes of orgasm, staring at the moon, and what the fuck is with this thing? It's just like a big blue bent line. Is it some kind of like mystical weapon? He's pulling back a bowstring. He's trying to lasso the moon. It was like some scrap of paper got stuck in the printer and they didn't pull out before they went to press. I don't know what's happening. But what I do know is this album is really solid. It's got it was a Mausoleum release, so it wasn't on a German label, but a very good sound. They have really good, a strong vocalist. He's got a very warm, sort of deeper voice. They are very, very good at doing the sort of the fast chugging, very tight riff, but it has a very sort of fat sound to it. And the songs are just instant earworms. They're extremely memorable, very catchy, great stuff. They did 2 albums and an LP and a single, and the single is a bitch to find. Missing that one. But the Brain Fever stuff is one of those real quality bands that flew under the radar and never got its due. But yeah, I really can't stress it, really tight, really, really impressive songwriting on these. They should have been bigger, should have gotten more acclaim.
That looks like a new wave of British heavy metal album from the cover.
Yeah.
To me, it actually looks like it looks like early Swedish band logo thing. A lot of Swedish bands use this kind of, the metallic, multi-toned font going across the logo thing, and had shitty artwork too.
All right, I guess I'm next up. We're gonna go with a more modern band, more in the black metalish style, maybe more of a black melodic death metal crossover, and that is Volcandra.
Dissection.
Yep, this band I think started out as a Dissection tribute band, and they carried on the spirit. They got a new album coming out, so their fourth album is coming out. But they have I have 3 of their albums. They all sound like that great Dissection albums. They do it without being. I mean, it's pretty obvious, but the songs are so well done. It really makes you. I mean, they even got the Necrolord cover with the blue hues. All 3 of the albums I have look the same. It looks like it could have been the spiritual successor to Storm of the Light's Bane. These guys do Dissection better than Dissection did at the end.
Are you not a fan of Rain Chaos, Marty?
Oh, I hate that album. I think that album was garbage, big time garbage.
Oh.
Not a fan. But yeah, not really much to say. If you like Dissection, you should definitely check out now 4 of their releases. They got a new one that's just coming out.
Huh.
Good stuff.
I've heard the name.
Isn't one of the dudes from Obscura in Folkandra?
I do not know. I knew there was a couple brothers in the band, but I don't know if they still are both in the band together anymore. I have no idea.
I don't know. Yeah. I remember hearing Folkandra when they're a napalm band, and I remember when they came out thinking that I didn't realize they were like an homage band. I remember when they came out, I thought, oh, these guys, they must be purposely, unintentionally ripping off Dissection. Well, it turns out they are purposely ripping off Dissection. So there's nothing wrong with that,
No.
Yeah, many bands.
If it's done well enough, that can be fun.
I mean, many bands have tried to. I always think of how hard Watain tries to steal off of Dissection and Naglfar.
They've just never been able to get there. I mean, I know people love Watain, but to me, I think they appeal to people's visual stimulation. I mean, they're more of a, I don't know. I'm not a big Watain fan. Not a big fan.
I like Watain, but I don't love Watain. But I don't think you're ever going to top Storm of the Light's Bane. And it's like one of those things. It's sort of like Keeper 2 or Keeper 1. Why would you try to do it? Storm of the Light's Bane is like a perfect album from for every song.
And I see why he made the change, because I mean, what do you do? I mean, you're not gonna come out and do that album.
So you go the Gothenburg route.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like we've talked about before. Yeah. How do you, when you hit that peak, whether it's, Keepers 2 or Nightfall Middle Earth, how do you follow it up? It's a hard thing to do.
That would be a good episode for you guys, is following up a classic album. It's like, what are the best albums to follow a classic album?
You know what? We'll have you back for that episode.
All right. Let's not dwell on the albums that fell on their face, but let's talk about or we can go both ways, because that might be hard to top here. Is how do you follow up a classic album? You're right, Marty. It's like he spent X amount of years in jail for killing a dude, unfortunately, and all that time. He probably had time to stew and think about how the heck am I going to top the greatest melodic black metal album of all time. And he comes out with Rain Chaos, which I happen to like, Marty. So
I mean, I have a couple friends that love it too, and I give them shit about it jokingly, but I just can't. It's got a new metal dumbness to it. I don't know. People like it, great. I think the instrumental on that album and Starless Eon are
Starless Eon's good.
Best songs on the album. But
John Nodvite would be a good book topic too. Someone needs to do a book on.
That'd be a very interesting book.
Yep.
Yeah, that would be a very interesting book, no doubt.
Yep. And speaking of book guys, he's back, David.
All right. Well, I know we haven't touched upon them too much tonight, and I know we were trying to stay away from the noise stuff, and I was thinking long and hard, but you sometimes just have to go with the classics. And I go with Under Jolly Roger here, just because the first few Running Wild albums, they were very Priest and Accept. Alan's been talking about Accept a lot. There clearly was an Accept influence and Priest influence there. But adopting a shtick like pirate themes here, I mean, that was talking about Tankard and their love of beer and all those things, but going the pirate metal route was a stroke of genius, and Carl Walterbach could not have been a happier dude when Rolf Kasperik started dressing up like Captain Hook promo pictures. I know that is fact, actually. So,
Oh yeah.
But it's interesting. Rolf's songwriting style is so unique. It's not again, it's not power metal, it's not melodic metal. It's just metal here, you know.
Mhm.
But I thought some of the songs here are great. You know, Raw Ride and Beggar's Night has always been great, and
Diamonds of the Black Chest.
Diamonds of the Black Chest are all great too. I know they performed this full live not too long ago, and it still sounds pretty great. And Rolf is still doing great. But the cover artwork's great too. The imagery, they definitely got it down, starting on Under Jolly Roger, and that stretch of albums, that next 4 or 5 albums, I think are all strong. They're some of them are a little interchangeable here, but yeah, they definitely hit their stride then. And yeah, Jurgen's right. They definitely got some crap from the press and the fans.
Oh yeah.
They got started, but then they started to sell too. You know, for a little while, they were one of Noise's highest selling bands too. So clearly they were doing something right. So it just goes to show, if you adopt a gimmick and you do it right, that was the way to do it.
Is that your favorite one?
I would say so. I love Port Royal a lot too, but I would have to go with this too. You know,
starting with Death or Glory, that's probably my favorite, but Port Royal is great. What's the one after that?
Pile of Skulls.
No,
Blazing Stone, and then Pile of Skulls.
Blazing Stone's great.
Yeah, Blazing Stone's good. Masquerade's good. They're all. Black Hand Inn is good too.
I mean, you can't really. He had such a unique riff writing style. The songs are so melodic and driving and so good. I don't know.
It always bothered me though, if you watch how he plays guitar, like how he picks.
Yeah, it's like way down. He's like doing this thing with his fingers. Yeah.
I never understood how he was able to play like that. Maybe that's part of his whole secret. I don't know.
Yep. Yeah, Running Wild is one of my 5 most favorite bands of all time. The consistency, the long streak of top-notch albums. But you're right, David. If they had only done those first 2 albums and then they fade into obscurity for whatever reason, because they come off that tour completely crestfallen and they go back to their day jobs.
Yeah.
The first 2 albums are very good. I like them, but they would probably, they would sit on the shelves, next to the Iron Angels and the Brain Fevers of the universe, and just they'd be another one of those German metal bands only really diehard fans, would ever dig up. But yeah, adopting, coming back off that tour, finding a new angle, which again is genius, sticking pirates and metal together, and taking that ball and running with it the way they did, pun intended. It worked really good. If I'm going to pick one, I have no problem with any of them today, and then it may change tomorrow. Today, I'm going to pick this one. I think this is just one of the most ass-kicking albums I've ever heard.
That's got Solace on it, right?
It's got Solace on it. It's got
great song.
Curse of Black Hand Inn. It's got Jesus.
Is the Privateer on there? The
Privateer's on here. Roll the Privateer.
Good job.
Black Hand. Yeah, just the opening track itself, Black Hand Inn, is just speed metal inferno of a track. The picking speed on these things is just insane.
Jorg Michael plays drums on that, if I'm not mistaken. They oft-traveled Jorg Michael from Stratovarius and Rage and a few other bands. So yeah, I think that also helped. Some of those guys. He was a studio musician. He was never a full-time member of Running Wild. But
I really hope they retire the drum machine for their new album.
Yeah, between them and Virgin Steel, I don't know what it is with these bands who can't hire a actual drummer to play.
It's probably cheaper and quicker in the studio.
Well, it is, but yeah, it's sort of.
Yeah, there are both bands, that are run by pretty strong personalities too, and I don't know if that factors into it or not, but it could be a thing.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yep.
All right, Alan, talk a lot because I have to go potty.
All right, I can do that in case nobody's noticed. Let's pick another one off the really dusty end of the shelf. This is a weird band name and a terrible cover, but a killer album. Not Fragile's. It's a mini LP, which I always have a thing with those. It's got technically 8 songs listed on it, but it doesn't even run 30 minutes. there's an intro, there's an outro, so you really get about. Actually, there's another outro. There's an outro to side A. Why do you have an outro on side A? So you've got like 5 real songs on here, maybe. It looks terrible. I will bet money it's named after a Bachman Turner Overdrive song, which is actually a good song. But you couldn't pick a worse cover graphic if you tried. But you put this on, you get through this, little 35-second intro thing, and it just hits like a fucking jackhammer. It is just full on headbanging speed assault. It's like a bulldozer going 200 miles an hour. Nothing about this album looks like it should sound like that. No. You should look at this and laugh and never, ever pick it up to see what it sounds like.
Very misleading cover.
Even the band pictures. I mean, what is this guy? This one's for a metal theologian out there. This dude right here is in a heavy metal band? He looks like he should be studying, I don't know, sports management therapy or something. This is not a heavy metal dude. But yeah, it's a crusher. The first few songs, With All My Might, High Into Heaven, you will not find heavier, more headbanging German metal on pretty much anything. Those 2 tracks will stand up against anything that has come out of that country.
What year did this come out?
88.
88. Yeah, it looks like a cover of the times there.
It's sad. It was on a Mean Machine, which is a small label, don't see a whole lot about, but they did release a few other things. They had an EP called Lost in the Dream. I think it was the year before. It's notable because it came on something like 17 colors of vinyl and nobody wanted any of them. And it wasn't bad, but it was a little more standard issue Stormwitch, early Rage kind of German metal. It's a little more nondescript. And this thing is just so much more crushingly heavy compared to the Lost in the Dream. And they're another band that did bounce back, and they got the band back together after a hiatus and put out some more albums probably starting in the mid to late 90s and ran into the 2000s. So they did get a second wind, actually, which was, hey, good for them. But yeah, that EP, it's the most nondescript looking thing in the world. I don't even know why I bought it. Actually, I do. It was another Sentinel Steel review. They had a 1-page blurb, probably in issue 2, where they just packed in 3 little bands together. They talked about Brain Fever, they talked about Atlane, and they talked about Not Fragile, as just these 3 little German bands that had never gotten any attention and all had kick-ass releases. And so I went out and bought albums by all 3 of them, and damn if they weren't right. All 3 of them were great bands.
I thought maybe it was the album cover that made you want to buy
it. Come on. Anything would be better than that. Any fucking thing. Go cut a picture out of a magazine and just glue it on. Something. I don't know. And I mean, really, could this guy not put on at least a jacket or something? Don't judge a book by its cover, guys. Because
you got it, flaunt it.
I
mean, if I had it, I would be sitting here without a shirt on right now, and maybe not any pants. But what are you gonna do?
Wait, you're wearing pants?
Today I am.
I feel very. There's a reason I'm not jumping up to run back to the CD rack.
I put pants on for our esteemed guest. I didn't want to scare him. All right.
Fair enough. All right. I have talked enough to get Marty back from the bathroom. So, Marty,
perfect.
You're up.
This is an awesome death metal album from Germany and is Necros Christos, Triumph Impurity Rites.
Yeah.
This thing is dark, evil, this dripping with darkness, and no one sounds like these guys. I just love their slow, grooving kind of crawl, and all of the intros are kind of a problematic thing on this album, but everything they put out's good. This is by far their best album. This is just kind of a magic in the bottle type of release. Super dark, and it is so well written and catchy, and the lyrics are perverted and strange and all over the place and very good. I mean, I don't know much more to say. If you haven't heard it, they definitely have a unique sound. Definitely worth checking out.
Which label released that?
This came out on oh my god, my eyes are Sepulchral Voice.
Yeah, yeah, it's a very cool band. They had a good run, and they seem like they kind of folded up shop and quit on their own terms. But yeah, they did I think 3 albums, and so they've got several EPs and demos along the way too. And yeah, they really play into in a way they remind me a little bit of Venom. They really just play into the whole spooky occult thing so blatantly and flagrantly, but it also then works for them. Yeah, the one knock with him has always been they always insisted on putting those little interludes in between every bloody song, and that does get a little tiresome.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, really cool band. It's yeah, I think it's one of the better death metal bands from the early part of the 2000s.
You know what band that did the intro thing that never really bothered me after all these years is Carcass on Necroticism.
Those are just
those little samples they're part of the song,
Yeah, those they fit the aesthetic very well. And that's a style too, where it helps to sort of break those songs up for just a second and separate them so you catch your breath. But it is really on theme the way they did those in that one. That's a good point.
All right, David.
All right, we've somewhat drifted over to them tonight, and I had a tough time thinking of one, and we've talked a little bit about their name. But here's my Ed Guy selection for tonight. I had to think about which Ed Guy to choose here, so I sort of went like in the middle of their catalog with Hellfire Club. So this is their first one on Nuclear Blast. This is sort of when they started to gain some momentum and some speed in Europe here after Mandrake. But I would say for this is pretty power metal. It's got sort of a rock edge to it. I mean, it is a little bit silly sometimes. They have a song called Laboratory Love Machine. And they later on they had a song called Superheroes. So it is a little bit of that Halloween sort of comedic value to it.
Is that a take on Dr. Steen, the Laboratory Love Machine?
I guess I don't know, but great production, great songs, pretty catchy stuff, pretty harmless for the most part, silly in spots, but this is the album that got me into Ed Guy, and I've stayed a fan ever since.
Yep.
Yeah, Which one is that, David? I'm sorry.
What was that?
Which one is that?
This is Hellfire Club.
Hellfire Club. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, it's a good pick, and I prefer the earlier Ed Guy ones myself, like Vainglory Opera,
that's great.
Salvation. They're a little more they have more of the classical power metal sound. Like you said, by that point they're getting a little more rock-ish friendly, but they do it well. I think they're a good example of another band that really tried to incorporate that fun vibe of Halloween, and they did it okay, but they never did quite master it the way that Halloween did. Whether it was always just a little too silly or something got lost in the translation, it never quite clicked quite as well as like a Dr. Steen or a Rise and Fall when Ed Guy tried to do it.
All right, Alan.
All right. Sure. Okay. I've got a couple left, and talked about Scorpions earlier, and this is a band that folks, they got on a big record label relatively quick, and the record label pushed really hard marketing them as the next Scorpions, which was probably unfair and burdened them down a little bit, but I liked the band a lot. I thought the early stuff, I can see the Scorpions comparisons to a point. It's a band called Bonfire. This is their second album. This is the European cover for Fireworks. They got RCA tied in, and this was an RCA release in the US, but they took the band pictures from the inner sleeve and put them on the cover with the logo, which didn't it didn't look. Yeah, you can tell this is late '80s for sure, no doubt.
Some guys know their way around a hair care product section in the store.
Oh yeah. They have been coiffed and poofed and fluffed and all that kind of stuff for sure. But I always felt like calling it the next Scorpions wasn't quite on point. These guys didn't have the same kind of really flashy guitar genius going on. They were very much going for the same kind of arena rock vibe, and they do it very, very well. if you like that, the popular Scorpions tunes from the 80s, this band does it very good. To me, they always sounded like Scorpions if Scorpions maybe had been an American band rather than a German band. The vocalist sings with very little accent. Very much, if you didn't know better, you'd think what you were listening to an American or maybe a British vocalist. He doesn't have the German inflections or stuff that a lot of German singers have. Excellent songs. Again, this is not Sodom. This is not Destruction. This is not Halloween. But yeah, if you like that, if you like the big mega hits from the 80s, but you're just tired of hearing them. None of us need to hear Rock You Like a Hurricane again. We've got that one nailed down in the cerebral cortex pretty good. If you want to hear something that's just as good, it just didn't get the break, check out the first 3 albums. Don't Touch the Light, Fireworks, and the third one, Point Blank, is really, really solid stuff. It's a band they did a 4th album that really was missing the mark. They left the scene, they came back, they've reformed, they've done later albums and stuff. And yeah, it's something that's going to be a little too commercial friendly to appeal to a ton of serious headbanging folks, but I really like it. I thought it was one of the good unsung hair metal, again, whether you want to call it hair metal or arena rock, whatever. It was one of the really unsung bands that they were on RCA. I mean, they had a break, but then it didn't click, which is a shame.
Tour sponsored by Germac.
They brought to you by L'Oreal. But yeah, it's super catchy songs. Great big. These were songs that with just the right push, or if they got on the right radio station with the right DJ pushing them, you would have had 20,000 people holding up their cigarette lighters, singing along to those songs so easily. It was the material's right there. It just didn't get the right push.
Okay.
All right, Marty, what you got for us?
This is my last one, actually.
Okay. Yep, I'm almost at the end of my stack here too.
This is a German band. Guy I consider a friend leads this band. It's his band. He writes all the stuff for it. Vogelflüster. This is the album I put out. Mein Fesseln. I'm saying it wrong, Jurgen. Sorry. These guys are very woodsy black metal, good pitch singing mixed in with that ripping black metal grit in the vocals. Very melodic, passionate, atmospheric songs. All their albums have been good. This is their 3rd album. They've got 3 more. They're putting out a new one, so it'll be their 3 more after this. But this is a great album. I think the band name translates to Forest Whispers. I'm not entirely sure on that. Jurgen, you'd have to correct me on that as well. But absolutely great atmospheric, woodsy black metal. Very passionate pitch singing, like I said, mixed with that traditional ripping vocal style. Excellent stuff. Good band.
Cool.
David.
All right, I got one more for tonight, and I'm scraping the bottom of the barrel here.
Right on.
I'm going off the beaten path a little bit here.
Okay.
So don't poke fun of me. I'm going with the only Crematory CD I have here. So Crematory, as we know, is probably Germany's leading goth metal band here. I somehow ended up with the promo album for this, and there's like 3 or 4 songs on here that I find to be phenomenal, that are just your great melodic, keyboard laden, catchy Euro goth.
Very keyboard laden. Yeah.
And this came out in 2000 on Nuclear Blast, and I've always had a fondness for it. Fortunately, the rest of Crematory's discography is very spotty and not so great.
I think I had the album Awake is the one I had.
Yeah, Awake was the one right before this one. You're right, Marty. So this is my only Crematory album. It's probably the only one I'll ever listen to here. I know they continue to put out stuff, and I know they made headlines a few years ago when the guitar player railed against the music industry, saying a band like Crematory can never tour or make a living based on.
I remember that. Yeah.
So yeah, I remember Bori was posting quite a bit of that on Blabbermouth, but really good album here. Probably 4 awesome songs, and the rest are sort of okay, but this is my only Crematory album, and I'll stick with it.
Yep. Yeah, I had Just Dreaming, which was a couple albums before that. But yeah, it was kind of a cool album. It was,
Right.
I see their stuff every now and then, but yeah, you're right. You check them out, and it can be pretty hit or miss.
Oh, here we go.
So Jurgen got into a fist fight with Crematory. Awesome.
He's in the band Repent. He's been in a bunch of bands. Jurgen
Okay.
Alan, bring us home, Alan.
I will go with an oldie, but a goodie. We'll wrap this up. Really little obscure one that is kind of right at the dawn of heavy metal moving into the 80s. So the album's got kind of a weird 70s vibe, but it's a little too heavy and aggressive to have ever fit into that scene well. It's almost got punky vibes at time. The band went nowhere, and we're going to get Rick. I know is enjoying the album covers. We got one more great band photo for you.
I can hardly wait.
But it's a band called The Hand of Doom. So obviously, Black Sabbath kind of influence there. They did an album called Poison Noise in 1979. And this thing it's a hoot, is a way to describe it. It's very heavy. The vocalist is what really sells it. He is got this very deep voice and is doing a very over-the-top delivery on these vocals. But it's just a really fun album to listen to. But yeah, you check these guys out on the cover.
Is that a Shadow Kingdom reissue?
This is the Shadow Kingdom reissue, Yep. They redid it about 2008, 2009. Yeah, the original is one of those albums where they did like 250 copies or some really micro pressing of it. You don't see the originals very often.
Check out the sideburns on that one dude.
Yeah,
I was gonna say his second chin is the fifth member of the band. Sorry,
I love the way this guy is
that's Meatloaf's kid.
This guy over here is looking like he wants to rumble, and he looks like he's probably I'm getting all backwards here. He's got the fists up, ready to fight, and he looks like he's like 90 pounds soaking wet or something. I don't know what image they were going for, but they missed by a mile. But it is a really good rocking album. Again, whether you want to call it heavy metal, it's probably not quite there, but it's a little over the top, and it has again just it's too aggressive to call it typical 70s hard rock material either. It's somewhere in between. But yeah, it's very blast. And again, the guy just does there's one time where he's doing the line, he's just like, "You want to blow your brains out," and he's like rolling the R's and stuff so much. It just sounds it sounds so crazy, but it works. It works as a fun listen. And yeah, the Shadow Kingdom reissue, they did it on vinyl, they did it on CDs, so it's not a hard or an expensive one to track down. The original is a different story, but yeah, you can certainly check it out. And don't go in expecting it to be really headbanging stuff, but it's just really fun, heavy music. And it was one of those little bands. And there's a lot of Germany had a hard rock scene that really was. You had bands like that. It wasn't just the Scorpions and Nobody, and then Accept and Nobody. There were a lot of other bands that did one album here or there, just as a local release or a regional release, and that was it. They called it a day for whatever reason. They never went any further. Hand of Doom is just one of that crowd that had laid a good solid heavy music scene that Walter Back and the early noise bands would inherit and progress to the next stage as metal sort of metamorphosed in the early 80s. So we'll close it on that one.
We made it, guys. David, thank you so much for joining us. It was an absolute pleasure having you with us tonight.
Yeah, my pleasure. This was great. Hope we can do it again some other time. But thank you for having me on.
We're gonna hold you. We're gonna hold you to that because we have to do that.
We've already got your topic. Yeah,
we already got your topic all lined up.
Oh man! All right, I'll have to rack my brains on that one. But yeah, that should be a fun one.
It will be, absolutely.
But everybody, check out David's books, No Celebration, the official story of Paradise Lost, and this bad boy here, Damn the Machine, the story of Noise Records. It's quite an eye-opening, awesome tale of Walter Bach's journey through the music business and all the people that lived and died beneath his Iron Fist.
Yep.
You
And
know,
we're going to keep an eye out for the official release on this new project that
this new
Yeah,
Which
just
is,
remember this band has an album called Slowly Rewrought. I don't know if that gives it away or not.
is it a or are we looking at maybe a late by an end of the year? My wife can buy it for me for Christmas kind of release, or maybe early next
I would
year.
say your wife can buy it for you by Black Friday kind of release.
I'll tell you
as
what,
a-
David, let's have you back when the book launches. How's that sound?
Hey,
that
We'll
sounds
talk
good.
about the book.
Yeah. All right.
And then explore our topic. And because
Yeah.
I think the topic of the band that I'm guessing is the topic of your book. We wouldn't have to say way too much about them. A lot of their albums are kind of, they got their thing.
Yeah,
But
yes, they do.
we could talk about that. We could talk about other things, but we will definitely get you back when the book launches.
that's
Great.
a
Don't
great
forget,
idea, Marty.
you are penciled in for sure.
All right. I will be here.
Awesome.
And stick around, David. Don't hang up after we end this.
All right. I'll
And
stay on.
everybody, if you like what you're seeing, subscribe to the Marty Worm channel. Hit the bell, all that good stuff. I hate to be a slut that way, but hey, be alerted when we're posting every Friday typically. And should we announce next week's guest?
It's on the books. We might as well.
Next week we've got the infamous King Fowley is coming by.
Oh, geez. All right.
We are going to deep dive the Black Sabbath catalog. So bring your popcorn and your opinions. Would be great to hear them. And I'm sure King is going to be a hoot because
He always
I'm
is.
11 all the time, and he's a great dude. And he is always.
We're going to do some fearless undead war pigs.
Yes, we are. But David, thank you again so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, it's
Seriously,
been
it
great
was a
talking
blast.
with you, man.
My pleasure.
But we're bailing. Y'all have a good night. Thank you for joining us on this Friday.
See y'all.
Ending broadcast.
It still says live.
I know. Patience.
Awkward.